Chapter 70. This. No matter what His Majesty thinks, Lord Sun disobeyed the imperial edict is the truth. How can this servant explain this to His Majesty? After the shock, Chief Steward Wang was worried about his own life. The Emperor's temperament was unpredictable. He would take people's heads if he glared at him. How could he explain this if he went back empty-handed? Come, quickly clean up Lord Sun's body and the things on the ground. Chief Steward Wang covered his nose with his sleeve and turned around to order the young eunuchs who came with him. The young eunuchs were also afraid of being angered. Although they were afraid, they still trembled and came forward to clean up Sun Yu's body and the red and white things on the ground. Sun Jie and Sun Qin angrily pushed the eunuchs away. What are you doing? He's already gone. Do you still want to make an issue out of his body? When Duchess Ding saw this, she staggered to get up, but fell back to the ground because her legs were weak. She could only shout in a hoarse voice, "Don't move. I'll see who dares to touch my grandson's body." Her face was covered with tears, and she asked in grief, "He's already gone. You won't even let go of his body? If you want to touch my grandson's body, you have to step over my body." Duke Ding's eyes were red, and his voice was hoarse and trembling. He spread his arms in front of the eunuchs, but his body was like a mountain, blocking everyone in Duke Ding's mansion behind him. Looking at such a miserable family, how could Chief Steward Wang not wring his hands for Sun Yu? However, if he couldn't explain it, he was afraid that he would lose his life. "Duke, this servant has no choice. You know His Majesty's temper. If he really loses his temper, you and I can't bear it." After thinking for a while, Chief Steward Wang discussed again, "How about this? This servant will order someone to go back to the palace to report to His Majesty, and we will listen to His Majesty's decree. If His Majesty showed mercy, it would solve his dilemma. After all, if he offended Duke Ding, he wouldn't have a good ending." Duke Ding gritted his teeth and nodded, "In that case, I'll have to trouble Chief Steward." Chief Steward Wang repeatedly said, "I don't dare." He hurriedly turned around and ordered a young eunuch to go back to the palace to ask His Majesty's decree. The little chamberlain didn't dare to see the emperor, but he couldn't refuse. He could only leave with a sad face. Everyone braved the cold and waited in the courtyard. It was unknown when Xiao Shui had started to float in the air. The fluttering snow fell to the ground and melted, dampening the ground. But no one wanted to avoid it. In the courtyard, only the sound of the womenfolk sobbing and crying could be heard. Eldest aunt regained consciousness. When she saw her son's miserable state, she cried until she fainted again. Second aunt and the Sun clan hugged each other and cried bitterly. Qin Yining supported his grandmother. Tears streamed down his face like a broken thread, and he couldn't stop. Eldest cousin had committed suicide to prove his sincerity. Wasn't this an accusation against the incapable ruler? It was just that the concept of loyalty and patriotism was deeply ingrained in their bones. There were many things that they could not say out loud, and they did not dare to say out loud. If they didn't say anything, they would only be using their deaths to show their sincerity. If they did, it would be seen as having the intention to rebel against their superiors. Qin Yining didn't know what the others were thinking, but she hated the incapable ruler to the core. She couldn't help but think of Qin Huayuan. Eldest cousin used to be like adding oil to the fire, fresh flowers blooming with brocade. Wasn't Qin Huayuan the same? In troubled times, the most difficult thing to predict and resist was unpredictable fate. Half an hour later, the sound of disorderly footsteps could be heard. This time, it was not only the eunuch who had just spoken, but also several Jinwu guards who were walking in front of the emperor. When the eunuch heard the emperor's decree, he bowed confidently and said, "The emperor has a verbal order." He ordered this servant to make sure to explain it clearly to Duke Ding. Chief Steward Wang nodded and motioned for the eunuch to speak. The sobbing in the courtyard gradually weakened. Everyone stared at the eunuch who had delivered the message. The emperor said, "Your Duke Ding's mansion claims to be loyal, but you're not willing to sacrifice Sun Yu for the sake of the country. It's obvious that sacrificing Sun Yu alone can quell Dieju's anger. Perhaps Shihua City will withdraw its troops and release more than 10,000 captives. However, Sun Yu only knows how to show off his power, not to mention killing him. Even if he was chopped into 10,000 pieces, Even his corpse and brain matter would be sent to the great Jew country without any damage. Whoever dares to stop him will be charged with treason against the imperial decree. The eunuch's voice was sharp, but he also imitated the emperor's irritable tone perfectly. However, his voice was getting weaker and weaker, because everyone was staring at him as if they wanted to eat him alive. Chief Steward Wang waved his hand and ordered the eunuch to withdraw. Duke Ding bowed and said awkwardly, "Duke, you're the head of the family. You have to understand that the emperor's words have reached this point. This servant must take him away. Think about it. Can the Duke Ding's mansion withstand the two big labels of treason and disobedience to the imperial decree? Lord Sun is gone, but the Duke still has other children and grandchildren." Duke Ding clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white and the veins on his forehead bulged. He couldn't say a word. However, the womenfolk had already burst into tears. The Jinwu guards stepped forward and pushed away fifth cousin and eighth cousin, who still wanted to stop them. They put the red and white things scattered on the ground into a brocade box and worked together to carry Sun Yu's tragic body into a thin coffin that was temporarily prepared. Seeing that he had finally finished his task, Chief Steward Wang immediately cupped his hands and left in a hurry with his men. Duke Ding slowly raised his head and murmured, "Heaven wants to destroy Daju." Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes rolled back and his tall body leaned back. "Grandfather, Duke." The scene suddenly became a mess. In less than 2 hours, the news of such a big event in Duke Ding's mansion spread all over the capital. Everyone was in an uproar. Many people lamented and were shocked. Many soldiers were sad and angry. Qin Huayuan rushed over as soon as he got the news. Qin Yining and Qin Huaining followed the Sun clan and were busy asking doctors to take care of the womenfolk in the inner residence. Not to mention Duchess Ding, first aunt, and second aunt, even Duke Ding had fallen unconscious. For a moment, there was no one to make decisions about the matters of Duke Ding's mansion. Qin Huayuan took Sun Jie and Sun Qin to set up the lintel in the front yard. A mourning hall was set up. Sun Yu's clothes, shoes, and socks were placed in the coffin. He also ordered people to announce the death, keep vigil, burn paper offerings, and weep for the coffin. The entire Duke Ding's mansion was shrouded in white and grief. At this time, the Emperor and the Empress frowned in dissatisfaction when they saw Sun Yu's body and the scarlet mixed with white in the brocade box. "Your Majesty, what do you think Sun Yuanming meant? Could it be that he didn't want to submit to you? You ordered him to do something, so he risked his life to go against you." The Empress covered her mouth and nose with a fragrant handkerchief and fanned herself in disgust. The Emperor already had such doubts in his heart. After the Empress said this, he became even angrier. "We think Sun Yuanming has become stupid from studying too much. Forget it, we can only hope that he can pass the test of Daju's envoy. Servants. This servant is here." Chief Steward Wang smiled apologetically and bowed. The Emperor said impatiently, "You, personally invite Daju's envoy here. Tell him that we are holding a banquet and inviting him. Also, Sun Yu has already made preparations." Chief Steward Wang hurriedly bowed and retreated. The Emperor wanted to use a corpse and half a box of heart-killing objects to calm Daju's anger. However, when the envoy saw this, he slammed the table and stood up. He angrily criticized the Emperor, "You clearly have ulterior motives towards our Daju's Empress Dowager. If you want to eat her raw, the fresher the better. Only when a living person is slaughtered can it be considered fresh. If such a corpse is sent over, won't it become unbearably smelly? How do you expect the Empress Dowager to consume it?" The Emperor also knew this and could only smile apologetically and persuade him. The envoy angrily left without taking the corpse with him. The Emperor did not dare to act rashly in front of the envoy. After the envoy left, he flipped the table and loudly ordered Chief Steward Wang, "Throw Sun Yu into a mass grave for us. We are annoyed just looking at it." Chief Steward Wang's heart skipped a beat. He quickly lowered his head and retreated to do as he was told. Fortunately, Chief Steward Wang still had some humanity left in him. Although he had left him in the mass grave, he had immediately ordered someone he trusted to deliver a letter to the Ding public house, asking them to quickly clean up the mess so that he would not be eaten by wild wolves or dogs. When Sun Jie and Sun Qin heard this, they could not help but cry again. Their eyes were red with hatred. Qin Huayuan said tiredly, "No matter what, it is more important to bring Yuanming back and bury him. The rest needs to be discussed at length. You are not young anymore and understand many things. This is the Emperor's temperament. You are not just yourselves. Duke Ding's mansion is a big family. There cannot be any more mishaps." "Uncle, you are right." Sun Jie wiped his tears and said, "I will take my men and go quickly. Eighth brother, you stay here and guard." "Okay." Sun Qin also wiped his face. After Sun Jie left, Sun Qin gratefully bowed to Qin Huayuan. "Today is such a big matter. Fifth brother and I are already panicking. There is no one in charge at home. We don't know what to do. If it weren't for you, sigh." Qin Huayuan waved his hand. "We are all family." Sun Qin nodded emotionally and said, "Yes." Qin Huayuan sighed and exhorted, "Pass down the order. Tell everyone in the residence to watch their mouths. There are some things that can't be said out loud. His Majesty is currently in a fit of anger. If word gets out, it will be a fatal disaster." "Yes." Sun Qin pursed his lips and nodded. Qin Huayuan patted Sun Qin on the shoulder and said, "If the Emperor wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. This is the path of a subject." Hearing this, Sun Qin looked at the spirit banner that was blown by the cold wind, and tears came to his eyes again. Sun Jie rushed to take Sun Yu's body back. Finally, it could be put in the coffin. Qin Huayuan looked at Sun Yu in the coffin and suddenly felt that the teeth were cold without the lips and the teeth were cold. When he thought of how talented Sun Yu was when he was alive, he couldn't help but sigh. As soon as the Sun clan's side served Duchess Ding with medicine, Duchess Ding called Mother Bao to ask about the situation of Duke Ding and the outer courtyard. Mother Bao had changed into a plain dress with a white belt around her waist. She saluted and said, "Miss Tang has just seen Duke Ding. She said that he was so angry that he could only take medicine to slowly recuperate. Duke Ding woke up just now, took the medicine, and fell asleep again. The son-in-law of the outer courtyard took care of it with 5th Lord and 8th Lord. They have already put him in the coffin. You said that Brother Ming's zombie leader is back." "Yes." Mother Bao was afraid that Duchess Ding would faint again from anger, so she didn't dare to mention that she had taken Sun Yu back from the mouth of wild dogs and wolves in the mass grave. Duchess Ding only thought that the Emperor had sent Sun Yu back, so she closed her eyes sadly. Because he had died a violent death, Sun Yu's coffin only stopped for 7 days before he was buried. These days, Qin Yining and Qin Huaining had been following the Sun clan to take care of Duchess Ding. If it weren't for the fact that there were still 4 days until the Little New Year, the Sun clan wouldn't be willing to return to the family Qin. However, as a married woman, the new year was approaching, so she couldn't take root in her maternal family. Chapter 71. Something big happened to your maternal family. I shouldn't say much about you, but don't forget your identity. Although you're the daughter of the Sun family, you're a family Qin woman now that you've entered our family Qin. You have to think about the situation of our family Qin. Don't forget that your husband is the imperial tutor. Old Madam had been holding back her anger these past few days. Although a great talent like Sun Yuanming had passed away just like that, which really made people sigh and wring their wrists, Old Madam was worried that their family Qin would be implicated by Duke Ding's family. The Emperor had decreed. Regardless of whether this decree was reasonable or not, an imperial decree was an imperial decree. Although Sun Yuanming's death was tragic and stirring, the crime of disobeying the imperial decree was real. On the day of the accident, when Qin Huayuan wanted to go to Duke Ding's residence, Old Madam stopped him. However, her son had grown up and had his own ideas, so she didn't stop him. She originally thought that Qin Huayuan would just go to take a look. Who would have thought that he would help the Sun family? Even when she sent someone to say that she was sick and wanted Qin Huayuan to come back to take care of her, he only came back to take a look. After confirming that she was just pretending to be sick, he reasoned with her and left. But who did she do this for? Thinking about it, her son wasn't the kind of person who would forget his mother after marrying a wife. Maybe the Sun clan did something or said something. Today, she finally caught the Sun clan back to the residence. How could she not lose her temper? The Sun clan was already sad. Now, she felt even more dizzy. Originally, she wasn't good at analyzing these major events. Now, her brain was like paste. She didn't think about the deeper meaning of Old Madam's words. She only felt that Old Madam was blaming her for living in her maternal family for so long. When Qin Yining saw the Sun clan's expression, he knew that she was going to lose her temper. He wanted to stop her, but he wasn't as fast as the Sun clan's mouth. Old Madam, you're being too unreasonable. Something like this happened to my maternal family. My parents are so sad that they fell ill. Moreover, Yuan Ming's funeral hasn't been finished. How can I leave them alone? Old Madam, at least put yourself in her shoes and think about it. You can't be so unreasonable. The Sun clan's voice was a little hoarse, so when they screamed, they sounded even more hoarse. Upon hearing the Sun clan's words, Qin Yining knew that something bad was about to happen. He hurriedly explained, Old Madam, please calm down. Mother didn't mean it that way. Old Madam was so angry that she stood up and no longer listened to what Qin Yining was saying. Are you saying that I'm being unreasonable? Is there a daughter-in-law who talks to her mother-in-law like that? I've tolerated you all these years. Do you think I'm a pushover? You're asking me to put myself in his shoes. I don't have an eldest grandson, so I really can't understand it. You. The members of the Sun clan were trembling with anger. Her biggest regret in life was that she hadn't been able to give birth to a son for Qin Huayuan. How many times had her mother-in-law rolled her eyes at her over the years? Now, she was using this to poke at her heart. The Sun clan's tears rolled down like beads. She covered her chest and cried until she was out of breath. I know that Old Madam doesn't like me. You still want to go back to your maternal family? Seeing the Sun clan's crying, Old Madam was irritated and relieved. She sneered, Do you think that Duke Dinggua's estate is still the original Duke Dinggua's estate? Seeing that you're my daughter-in-law, I'll give you a piece of advice. Although Yuan Ming is tragic, he still defied the imperial edict. The emperor didn't punish him, so your Duke Dinggua's estate is like a knife hanging over your head. If you're really filial, you should think about your parents and brothers. You're not a young person anymore. You can't do things worse than your daughter, right? Look at Sister Hui. Look at what you've taught her. If I look at your conduct, I'll be glad that Sister Yi was swapped out early and wasn't led astray by you. Such heart-wrenching words made the Sun clan's face turn pale. Old Madam reprimanded her, but she shouldn't have said this in front of her daughter and servants. How was she going to uphold the rules in the future? The Sun clan felt that their dignity had been trampled into the dust by Old Madam. Because Qin Huaining's sweetheart had died in front of her, she didn't have any appetite these past few days. Her complexion was deathly pale, and she had lost a lot of weight. Now, when she heard Old Madam's indirect scolding, she instantly felt humiliated, angry, and helpless. It turned out that she, an outsider who had taken over a magpie's nest, had saved Old Madam's granddaughter. Qin Yining looked at the crying Sun clan, then looked at Old Madam, who was angrily glaring at him. Then, he looked at Qin Huaining, who lowered his head and endured. For a moment, he felt quite helpless. The Sun clan's brain wasn't clear. Old Madam was too snobbish. She was very good at seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. Qin Huaining was even more sensitive and jealous now. If he let the three of them continue to stir up trouble, he was afraid that something big would happen. Qin Yining looked at Mammy Qin, who was beside Old Madam, for help. Mammy Qin immediately understood and nodded slightly. She patted Old Madam's chest and helped her to sit down. Then, she said with a red face, Old Madam, please calm down. Eldest Madam is straightforward and doesn't have crooked intentions. We're all one family. Aren't you still concerned about Eldest Madam's family behind her back? Then, she turned to the Sun clan and said, Eldest Madam, don't blame Old Madam for speaking too fiercely. She was just speaking hastily. Old Madam is still worried about the Fu. Eldest Madam also knows that Grand Preceptor is in a difficult position in the imperial court now. Don't be sad. Old Madam is doing this for the good of this family. Not only did she appease Old Madam, but she also gave the Sun clan a way out. If they were smart, they would go along with the meaning and apologize, and the matter would be over. However, the Sun Clan member said quickly, I know that old madam is thinking too far ahead after seeing that our family has committed a crime. Previously, when our family was flourishing, you all rushed to talk about marriage. Where did your enthusiasm go? Now that the master has achieved meteoric success, you all have forgotten who promoted him. When there's a matter, you want to shrink your neck. You're really heartless and unscrupulous. I don't like you. What the Sun Clan said was the truth. However, no matter how true it was, they shouldn't say it indiscriminately. Could it be that after saying these words, they wouldn't be able to live in the family in the future? Qin Yining held his forehead and hurriedly pulled the Sun Clan member to kneel down. Old madam, please calm down. My mother is confused because of grief. She didn't do it on purpose. Didn't do it on purpose? Old madam's face was red. It was unknown whether it was because she was embarrassed or angry after being exposed. If it weren't for the fact that you gave birth to such a sensible daughter like Sister Yi, I would have asked eldest madam to divorce you today. If you don't want your son to have the reputation of flattering the strong and stepping on the weak, then come and divorce me. I've had enough of this kind of in-laws. The Sun Clan member shook off Qin Yining's hand, got up, and left. Qin Yining hurriedly chased after the Sun Clan member and pulled her back. He even gave Qin Huaining a meaningful look. In any case, Qin Huaining was more tactful than the Sun Clan. No matter how much she didn't get along with Qin Yining, she should know who was family behind closed doors at critical moments. In the end, they were all members of the eldest branch. When the Sun Clan caused trouble, the entire eldest branch lost face. However, Qin Yining obviously overestimated Qin Huaining's intelligence and underestimated her selfishness. Old madam, Qin Huaining knelt down. There was a layer of mist in her swollen eyes from crying these days. Please calm down. Mother didn't mean to say these things. Mother's relationship with father is very good in private. Even if you don't look at other things, at least look at father's face and forgive her. These words were persuasion, but when used on old madam, it was equivalent to pouring a ladle of hot oil on the fire. Old madam doted on her son the most and had a kind of possessiveness towards him. This possessiveness was strongest on Qin Huaiyuan. Although she hoped that her son and daughter-in-law would be harmonious and would get angry when she saw her daughter-in-law do stupid things, in her heart, she still secretly felt that her daughter-in-law wasn't good. Only then would her son recognize who was the closest to him. Qin Huaining precisely grasped old madam's mentality. The Sun Clan didn't dote on her anymore, so why would she still speak up for the Sun Clan? There was no good person in this family at all. Sure enough, as soon as old madam heard this, she exploded. She smashed the teapot and teacup and scolded, I knew it was you, a stupid woman, who urged Brother Meng to stay in Duke Dinggua's mansion to help your maternal family. Don't you see what kind of situation it is now? Your nephew is dead. Don't tell me you want your husband to also be implicated. The Sun Clan had just been pulled back by Qin Yining when they heard old madam's words. They were so angry that their faces turned ashen. Just as they were about to shout back, they felt a pain in their heart. Their vision turned black, and their body softened and fell down. Mother! Mother! Qin Yining caught the Sun Clan's body that had softened. Ayo! The eldest madam fainted. Mammy Qin hurriedly called someone over and ordered, quickly go and call the doctor. Old madam was stunned. Was this a new trick that she had learned? Was she really fainting or faking it? Now that she fainted, was she trying to blackmail her or something? Mammy Qin had already run out at this time. Quickly, 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 carry the eldest madam into the room first. The maidservants and senior servants scrambled to carry the eldest madam. Don't move. Qin Yining pulled away the people who were messing around and said, I've seen people who suddenly fainted. It's not good to move them after moving them. Later, the doctor said that it's because of a heart attack, so they can't move around recklessly. Quickly, go and call Bing Tang over first. The last sentence was an order to the head maidservant Ji Xiong. Just as they returned to the residence, Bing Tang and Song Lan were sent back by Qin Yining to prepare for bathing and so on. They weren't brought along. Ji Xiong hurriedly nodded and quickly left. Qin Yining anxiously pinched the perlicue and the philtrum. At this time, Qin Huaining also knelt beside the Sun Clan. Tears streamed down her face. Mother, don't scare your daughter. Quickly wake up. Qin Yining sneered. She didn't avoid the old madam, Mammy Qin, and the others, nor did she avoid the servants in the courtyard who were watching. She raised her hand and slapped Qin Huaining. This slap was merciless. Qin Huaining was in so much pain that she saw stars and fell to the ground. She tilted her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. There was actually a tooth in the blood. Ah, my tooth. You. Qin Huaining, I'm telling you, it's fine if Mother is fine. If anything happens to Mother, I'll be the first to chop you up. You dare. Try me if you don't believe me. Qin Yining's gaze was so sharp that it scared Qin Huaining so much that she trembled. She didn't dare to meet her gaze again, and her confidence weakened. How can you blame me for this? Chapter 72. Qin Yining's imposing manner scared Qin Huaining so much that his face paled and he shook his head. You don't dare. What right do you have to speak like that? Who are you in this family? There's old madam, father, and mother. What right do you have to punish me? Grandmother. She wants to kill me. Quickly save me. Qin Huaining was about to get up and run inside to ask for help. Qin Yining grabbed him by the collar and casually threw him aside in a seemingly relaxed manner. Qin Huaining retreated several steps and fell in the middle of the courtyard. Try shouting again. His harsh words scared Qin Huaining silly. She no longer dared to make a ruckus. She only knew how to cover her face and cry in grievance. The surrounding servants were all frightened and didn't dare to breathe loudly. In the courtyard, Qin Yining called out to the Sun Clan in a gentle tone that was completely different from before. Mother, don't be afraid. The doctor will be here soon. Mammy Qin looked at Qin Huaining and quietly entered the room. Old madam, what's going on outside? Old madam shook her head and sighed. I'm really disappointed in Sister Hui. Now that I've calmed down and thought about what happened just now, wasn't it because she mentioned Brother Meng that I was so angry that I spoke without thinking? This isn't the first time she's done this. Mammy Qin secretly thought, you're not doing anything now because you didn't see with your own eyes how fourth young miss knocked out a person's tooth. She only dared to criticize silently, but she still had to reply. It's just that Miss Huaining just had a tooth knocked out by fourth young Miss R. Old madam stood up in surprise. She could hear the noise outside, but she couldn't see the scene. Sister Hui actually knocked out a tooth. Old madam hurriedly wanted to go out. Mammy Qin held old madam's arm and said softly, Old madam, you're not feeling well today. You were also angered by first madam. You can't go out now. It won't be good if you catch a cold. I think fourth young miss has a plan and a sense of propriety. When she makes a move, won't she teach Miss Huaining a lesson for you? But Sister Hui, old madam, the reason why Miss Huaining dares to sow discord between us is because she has nothing to fear because of your favor. It was time to teach her a lesson and see if she would restrain herself. Moreover, don't you want to see fourth miss way of doing things? In any case, this servant really wants to see if fourth young miss will be like first old master when he was young. Speaking of Qin Huayuan was the Dowager Duchess's weakness. When Qin Huayuan was young and impetuous, he had dealt with several old concubines with thunderous methods. If anyone dared to touch her, as his son, he would be the first to be unwilling and play with them to death. Old madam smiled. Sister Yi is very similar to Brother Meng. She takes after her father in terms of filial piety. That's right. Mammy Qin helped old madam sit down and said, it won't be too late for you to make a decision after seeing the situation. Moreover, it's not like you don't care about Miss Huaining. Let her learn a lesson first. It's not too late for you to help her in her hour of need. Old madam thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. She nodded and sighed. The girl she had watched grow up with her own eyes had become such a scheming person. She even schemed against her mother, who had raised her for 14 years. Family Qin had never treated her unfairly. Her food and clothes were better than those of the girls in the Fu, but she still wasn't satisfied. It was time to teach her a lesson. While they were talking, Ji Xiong ran over with Bing Tang. After checking on the Sun Clan's situation, Bing Tang took out a simple and old wooden box. He opened it and took out a long and thin silver needle. He pricked the Sun Clan's body a few times and inserted the needle into her philtrum. The Sun Clan exhaled and dazedly opened her eyes. Everyone couldn't help but exclaim, "Big Madam is awake." There were also people who didn't know the inside story who secretly praised Qin Yining's maidservant for having such amazing medical skills. "Mother, you're awake. Are you okay?" Qin Yining happily took her hand and carefully helped her sit up. The Sun Clan shook her head and leaned on Qin Yining's shoulder. Her voice was still a bit hoarse. "I'm fine. What's wrong with me?" Bingtang smiled and said, "Madam has been too tired and sad these days. Naturally, your body can't take it. Your foundation is very good, so your body is fine. It's just that your emotions are affected. You'll be fine after resting for 2 days." The Sun Clan was still angry when she thought about what happened just now. However, she was powerless and couldn't make a fuss anymore. She could only nod her head. "Bingtang, go tell someone to prepare a small sedan chair." As soon as Qin Yining finished speaking, Yu Yi brought over a warm sedan chair with a sturdy female servant. She smiled and said, "Mammy Qin has already ordered this servant to prepare it. The doctor has already arrived at Xingning Garden. Big Madam, please get on the sedan chair." Qin Yining didn't ask for help. He put his hands under the Sun Clan's armpits and directly lifted her up. He then helped her into the sedan chair. He bowed and lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, saying, "Mother, go back and rest. I'll ask Bing Tang to go back with you. After I'm done with the mess here, I'll immediately go and serve you." The Sun Clan nodded and tiredly leaned against the wall of the sedan chair that was covered with a dark green velvet cloth. Qin Yining patted Bing Tang's hand and said, "Help me take care of her." Bing Tang smiled and said, "I know. Don't worry, miss." After watching them leave, Qin Yining glanced at the main room that hadn't responded. He thought for a moment and a cold smile appeared on his lips. He turned around and grabbed Qin Huaining by the collar and lifted her up from the ground. Qin Huaining was so scared that she screamed, "What are you doing? Mother has already woken up. This is grandmother's courtyard. How dare you be so presumptuous?" Qin Yining didn't say a word. He grabbed her hair and walked out until the hairpins on her temples fell to the ground. Her hand pressed down on Qin Huaining's head. Qin Huaining could only follow with a bent back. She scratched wildly but couldn't catch Qin Yining. She screamed and struggled like a prey being carried by a hunter. The head maidservant Ji Xiong and Yu Yi were stunned. They had been in the Qin manor for so many years, but they had never seen such a young miss with such strange strength. The two hurriedly went into the room to report. "Matriarch, fourth young miss is pulling Miss Huaining's hair and pulling her away." Matriarch finally couldn't sit still. "Let's quickly go and take a look. Don't kill her." Mammy Qin was also somewhat worried. Could fourth young miss really be impulsive and chop her up? She grabbed a cloak and draped it over the matriarch's shoulders. Then, together with Ji Xiong and Yu Yi, she helped her out. Some curious maidservants and older female servants followed Qin Yining out of Ci Xiao Garden and followed him all the way to the back garden. It was winter now. Although the surface of the water wasn't as thick as it was in the north, there were still ice shards in the pond. Qin Yining came to the side of the lotus pond and directly threw him in without saying a word. With a plop, Qin Huaining's entire body fell into the lotus pond full of mud, remnants of lotus, and ice shards. The water wasn't deep and only reached his waist. However, Qin Huaining fell in horizontally. He was scared stiff and had the instinct to survive. When the matriarch rushed over, she only saw Qin Huaining struggling in the lotus pond and shouting for help. Qin Yining stood on the shore and sneered, "You won't die. Stand up." Qin Huaining struggled for a long time before hesitantly standing up. Only then did she realize that the water only reached her waist. She immediately became angry and embarrassed. All kinds of emotions turned into resentment. Her muddy and battered appearance was seen by second Furen, third Furen, sixth Furen, seventh Furen, and eighth Furen, who had just rushed over after hearing the news. The womenfolk were also scared stiff. Mammy Qin frowned and ordered, "What are you all standing there for? Quickly pull Miss Huaining up." Seeing that the matriarch had come, Qin Huaining had a backbone. She went up to the shore and squatted on the ground. Then, she hugged her shoulders and sobbed. She looked like she was scared stiff and only knew how to cry. Qin Yining said, I let you go down just to wash your mouth, brain, and heart with this muddy pond. Qin Huaining sobbed even louder. The family Qin raised you for 14 years and never treated you unfairly. Even if you're no longer the legitimate daughter, the matriarch, father, and mother have never thought of sending you back to the health hall. You don't know how to be grateful. Instead, you instigated the relationship between mother and the matriarch. Are you still worthy of being called a human? Qin Huaining shook her head. I know you hate me, but what crime did I commit? You were indeed innocent when you were exchanged, but what did you do? I don't hate you. You don't deserve to be hated by me. I will only kill you. Qin Huaining hugged her knees and cried until her whole body trembled. Qin Yining sneered, you don't have to use that delicate and pitiful act. I'm a barbarian. I don't like it. Since the matriarch and all my sisters are here today, I'll say it here. If I find out that you instigated trouble and used mother again in the future, it won't be as simple as today. Was this simple? Not to mention that one of her teeth was knocked out, she was also thrown into the lotus pond to eat ice water and mud. What would it be like if it wasn't simple? You dare. Qin Huaining finally raised her head. She was trembling like a sieve. Don't you know whether I dare or not? Qin Yining knelt down in front of the matriarch and said sincerely, Granddaughter's behavior was disagreeable. I know that I was wrong. Asking the matriarch to punish me. For a moment, the matriarch didn't know whether she should punish her or not. Her appearance was 70% similar to the young Qin Huayuan. Her imposing manner of not allowing anyone to hurt her mother made the matriarch think of herself and her eldest son in the past. The matriarch also knew that Qin Huaining really needed a powerful person to deal with her. Otherwise, the inner residents might be stirred up by her. Thinking of this, she frowned and said, although you're reasonable, your methods are too ruthless. You threw her into the lotus pond on such a cold day. Aren't you afraid of making her sick? She actually didn't mention that tooth. Yes, granddaughter knows her mistake. Qin Yining instantly understood the matriarch's thoughts and secretly let out a sigh of relief. Qin Huaining raised her head and looked at the matriarch in disbelief. Grandmother, don't you love me anymore? How can you treat me like this? The matriarch looked at her miserable appearance, which was covered in dirt. She felt distressed and angry. Sister Hui, I watched you grow up. I know what you're thinking. You're on your own. She then instructed everyone, disperse. What are you all gathered here for? After saying this, she actually led Mami Qin, Ji Xiong, and Yu Yi away. She had no intention of punishing Qin Yining at all. Second Madam, Third Miss, and the others, who weren't clear about today's matter, now understood that Qin Huaining must have done something to court disaster again. Even the matriarch wasn't willing to help her. Qin Yining bowed to her two aunts and cousins and explained that the Sun clan had fainted today and needed to immediately attend to them. The sisters were also concerned and followed Qin Yining to Xingning Garden. Qin Huaining was carried back to Snow Pear Courtyard in a small sedan chair by Fugui and Sayun, who had rushed over after hearing the news. When the back garden quieted down, Qin Huayuan and Yu Qiyang brought their respective attendants and came out from the rockery not far behind the lotus pond. Chapter 73. Yu Qiyang looked in the direction that Qin Yining had left. His eyes were bright, and his expression was stunned. He was so stunned that he didn't hear Qin Huayuan's words. Qin Huayuan could guess a thing or two from his expression. He raised his voice slightly. My daughter was rude. Please forgive her, Your Highness. Ah! Oh! Imperial Preceptor, what are you saying? Yu Qiyang's face heated up. He covered his mouth and faked a cough before saying, Your daughter is extremely pure and filial. She is a person with a true temperament. What's wrong with this temperament? Compared to those delicate women, your daughter is more heroic and exuberant. It's like painting a plum blossom. Only by adding strong branches can you draw out the strength of character. Your daughter's strength of character is completely based on her temperament. My daughter is naughty and mischievous. She really doesn't deserve Your Highness's praise. This subject will strictly discipline her in the future. Qin Huayuan felt that Qin Yining's conduct was too bold and unruly. It didn't conform to the rules of a noble family's young lady. Yu Qiyang anxiously said, "Imperial preceptor, don't restrain her. There's nothing wrong with this temperament." His undisguised fondness for Qin Yining caused Qin Huayuan to involuntarily size up Yu Qiyang's expression. He saw that Yu Qiyang's fair and clear face had flushed red, and he could not help but smile knowingly. Who hasn't been young? However, after many years of being baptized by officialdom, Qin Huayuan's heart had long been wrapped up in layers of hard rock. Only when he saw such an interesting reaction from a young man would he be reminded of some memories from his youth. The two continued to walk on the stone path, one in front and one behind. They ordered their attendants to follow them from a distance. The matter of Duke Ding's mansion this time really makes one sigh. Father Emperor was scared out of his wits by Da-ju. For a moment of stability, he did anything. Although I am Father Emperor's son, I don't agree with Father Emperor's way of doing things. However, Father Emperor refuses to listen to anyone's advice. He only listens to the Empress's request. Yu Qiyang's tone was full of dissatisfaction and helplessness. Qin Huayuan naturally didn't want to get involved in the relationship between the royal father and son. He just listened in silence and didn't say anything. Yu Qiyang continued, "Right now, Da-ju's envoy has already sent a letter back to our country for several days. Presumably, we will receive a reply in less than 2 days." He didn't know what Zhu Di was going to do next. "I only hope that Imperial Father can be firm and not let down Sun Yuan Ming's painstaking efforts. His Majesty is wise and mighty. Naturally, he only did that because he was urged by others. The Emperor was the Son of Heaven, and the Son of Heaven was wise. No matter what he did, it was not his fault. It was bound to be the fault of others." Yu Qiyang smiled helplessly, nodded and sighed, "Yes." Qin Huayuan said slowly, "As for Yuan Ming, although he disobeyed the imperial decree, he used his own flesh and blood to once again arouse the passion of the Dayan people. This is even more shocking than the proclamation of that year. Your Highness, you must remember this line: the greatest disaster is to underestimate the enemy. Underestimating the enemy will cause one to lose one's treasure." When Yu Qiyang heard this, he stopped in his tracks. When the enemy forces combine forces, the one who mourns will win. This is a line from Laozi. Exactly. Qin Huayuan walked slowly with his hands behind his back. The saying that an army filled with grief is bound to win doesn't come out of thin air. Yuan Ming is willing to sacrifice himself to show his sincerity and also to boost our morale. If Your Majesty can use this matter to make a fuss and publicize his deeds, it will definitely stimulate the morale of Shihua City's officers and soldiers. We might still have a chance of winning against Meng Shi. When Yu Qiyang heard this, he immediately felt his spirits rise. He clapped his hands and said, "The Grand Preceptor is indeed a great schemer. Based on what you said, Yuan Ming might have already calculated this before he left. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen such a fierce method. I will speak to Imperial Father about this matter. Presumably, any man with a bit of courage will be encouraged." Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded, but his thoughts were not as optimistic as the Crown Prince's. If His Majesty really had the heart, he wouldn't have been so submissive to Da-ju's envoys. He didn't have the slightest majesty of an emperor. Not only was His Majesty scared out of his wits by Da-ju, but he didn't even consider the future. Sun Yuan Ming had once made a name for himself with a proclamation of war. To put it bluntly, His Majesty was cursed by the common people. However, Sun Yuan Ming had an indomitable spirit. Such a heroic figure had sacrificed himself because of His Majesty's muddle-headedness and cowardice in order to curry favor with the enemy country's Empress Dowager. How many people in the world were in an uproar and indignant? Qin Huayuan didn't think that Da-ju's physician had really prescribed a prescription to eat human brains. Zhu Di had always been crafty and cunning. This time, he was afraid that he had deliberately done this to drive a wedge between the Dayan Emperor and his subjects. However, His Majesty had jumped into the hole that His Majesty had dug without hesitation. What could they, as subjects, do? Right now, the court officials saw that Da-ju's iron hooves had already stepped into Shihua City. It could be said that everyone was in danger. They were afraid that the city would be breached and that they would be the next to be sacrificed. The Crown Prince and Qin Huayuan discussed how to reply to His Majesty. After remembering everything that Qin Huayuan had said, the Crown Prince excitedly bid farewell. Qin Huayuan looked at the Crown Prince's high-spirited back and shook his head. The Crown Prince was a kind and honest person. His attainments in calligraphy and painting were also very profound. With this kind of temperament, if he were to be the son of an ordinary wealthy family or the second legitimate son of a noble family, there would be no pressure. It was a pity that he was born as the Crown Prince. Qin Huayuan had already predicted that there was little hope that His Majesty would listen to His Majesty's advice. However, even if there was little hope, he still had to try his best. As subjects, they didn't dare to say anything. After all, the Crown Prince was His Majesty's only successor. Even if His Majesty was angry, His Majesty would at most reprimand him. At least, His Majesty wouldn't drag His Majesty out to be beheaded. Qin Huayuan called Qi Tai, "Go and instruct people to pay attention to the movements in the palace these days." After His Majesty and His Majesty's reply, "What is His Majesty's attitude?" Qi Tai nodded and quickly retreated. Qin Huayuan then returned to Xingning Garden. In Xingning Garden, the Sun Clan had just seen the doctor. The doctor's diagnosis was no different from what Bing Tang said. Qin Yining was finally relieved. He helped the Sun Clan lie down to rest and said, "Mother, don't get angry easily. It's harmful to your health. Is your health more important, or is it more important to be angry with others?" The Sun Clan said weakly, "I'm clumsy with words. I've never been able to gain the upper hand at critical moments. Anyway, I'm bitterly disappointed." Qin Yining said with a smile, "Don't think so much. You're living with Father, not with others. As long as Father is sincere to you, it's fine. Think about it. How much has Father helped eldest cousin in Ding General Manor these days? Grandfather and grandmother both fell ill. Fifth cousin and eighth cousin didn't know what to do for a while. Isn't it all because of Father's guidance and support? Father is willing to do this for Ding General Manor, isn't it all for you?" Hearing this, the Sun Clan felt very comfortable. There was a smile on her lips. "Are you serious?" "Of course it's true." Qin Yining nodded seriously. He took the bird's nest porridge from Mother Jin and fed it to the Sun Clan while they were talking. He continued, "Father and Mother were a young couple. For many years, you were deeply in love with each other. Didn't you go through a lot together? Although I've only been home for a short time, I can see that Father is very considerate and respectful to you." The Sun Clan had just taken the medicine and had no appetite. Hearing Qin Yining's words, she ate more than half a bowl of bird's nest porridge. Even her gloomy face gradually brightened. Mother Jin looked at her and smiled. She secretly thought that her biological daughter was still considerate. Knowing that she was thinking for her biological mother, Mother Jin also persuaded her, "Fourth young lady is right. Madam just didn't think about it because she was angry. In fact, isn't that the case? Madam is living with Master. Master is willing to dote on you. What else is so important?" The Sun Clan nodded. The depression that had been suppressed for the whole afternoon had disappeared. With a smile on her face, she tapped Qin Yining's nose. "No wonder your grandmother said that you see things clearly. Isn't that the case? When we go back together, your grandmother will only dote on you and not me." Qin Yining laughed. "Grandmother dotes on me so much because she dotes on you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have anything to do." The Sun Clan couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Her complexion also returned to its normal state. Qin Huayuan stood in the corridor and clearly heard the conversation in the room. His face blushed uncomfortably. After thinking about it, he didn't enter the room and turned to leave. Cai Ju and Cai Lan, who had been ordered by Qin Huayuan not to make a sound, looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. After the Sun Clan ate the porridge and rinsed her mouth, Qin Yining and Mother Jin helped her to sleep. Qin Huaining only found out the next day that Qin Yining knocked out a tooth and threw it into the back garden's lotus pond. After listening to Mother Jin's objective description, the Sun Clan looked at herself in the bronze mirror and sighed after a long time. Sister Hui is still a child. In a moment, open the storeroom and choose 2 of the new colored rulers. Send them to Sister Hui to buy new clothes. Also, invite an imperial physician to take a good look at Sister Hui. The weather is so cold, it's best if a young girl doesn't injure her foundation. Yes. Mother Jin smiled in response. However, in her heart, she secretly approved of the 4th young Miss actions and felt incomparably carefree. Such an ungrateful ingrate was clearly a troublemaker. If he didn't punish her properly, she might really become the root of the family's mess. Only someone as powerful as the 4th young Miss would be able to control her. Putting aside the fact that Qin Huaining had caught a cold and was bedridden, the old matriarch and the Sun clan's hearts ached. On the day of the Little New Year, when everyone was jubilant, the Crown Prince was punished to kneel in front of the Imperial Library for 4 hours. He was so cold that he fainted. Only then was he allowed by the Emperor to be carried back to the Eastern Palace and grounded. This news quickly spread throughout the Imperial Court. Along with this news, Daeju's Emperor, Li Chitian's letter of credence also spread. No one knew how Daeju did it, but the letter of credence was like an imperial notice. In one night, it was plastered all over the streets of the capital and the nearby towns. It was written with bold words, angrily denouncing the Yang dynasty's emperor for having ulterior motives. As long as one's brain matter was given to the Empress Dowager of Daeju, he wouldn't even accept it. There was no sincerity in peace. It even threatened to flatten the Dian and capture the emperor to be put to death by 1,000 cuts. The common people were afraid, angry, cursed the incapable ruler, and cursed Daeju. All kinds of opinions were spread. When the emperor heard the news, he was so scared that his face turned pale. He first wrote a letter of apology and ordered people to quickly send it to Daeju. Chapter 74. The ancient city walls of Shihua City stood tall in the middle of a vast expanse of land. The city walls stretched as far as the eye could see, like a giant with its arms outstretched, embracing all of Shihua City's soldiers and civilians. In Daeju's military camp, which was 50 li outside of the city, dozens of flags fluttered in the wind. The black flags were embroidered with golden threads of a fierce tiger baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, as if it could pounce at any time and tear its prey into its stomach. This was the military flag of the Tiger Army led by the Grand Marshal of Daeju's armed forces, Prince Zhongshiren Pang Xiao. The large flags with the word swastika on a red background and black characters fluttered in the wind along with the military flags. Inside the military camp, everything was in order. Only the drill ground was filled with noise and excitement. Good. Marshal Feng is so skilled. Wang Erhu, are you a freeloader? 4 people against 1 marshal. If you still lose, you'll have to share your steamed buns with your brothers tonight. In the drill ground, 4 burly northern men with broad shoulders and round waists were bare-chested. They were sweating so much that white steam rose from their bodies in the cold wind. Their bodies were covered in dust, and they were all eager to fight. They surrounded a similarly bare-chested, muscular young man. Even though they had already been beaten twice, the 4 of them were still unconvinced. They didn't believe it. The 4 of them were men who could stand on their fists and walk on their arms. They might not be a match for the marshal in martial arts, but how could the 4 of them lose to the marshal in wrestling? Marshal Feng was strong, but he was also a skinny man. People always said that one's strength was not a disadvantage. They didn't believe that they would lose this time. The 4 of them roared at the same time and rushed forward. The sweat on Pang Xiao's forehead slid down, and white steam rose from his forehead in the cold wind. His eyes flashed with excitement as he quickly met the attack. Marshal is so mighty. You guys should give it your all. The surrounding soldiers weren't afraid of the drama and shouted excitedly. Huzi and Zheng Pei, whose beard were fluttering in the wind, were watching the battle from the side, shouting and cheering for Pang Xiao. Zheng Pei had a thick overcoat draped over his shoulders. He looked at Pang Xiao with a faint smile. The crow's feet at the corners of his eyes and the smile lines at the corners of his lips made this old man in his 60s look exceptionally loving. The outcome of the battle was quickly decided. Facts had proven that wrestling was not all about strength, it was also about technique. Pang Xiao reached out and pulled up the men who had been knocked down by him. He laughed heartily and said, "I'll give everyone an extra meal tonight. Let's eat meat today." "Good." Everyone cheered. Every man looked at Pang Xiao with eyes full of enthusiasm and worship. Pang Xiao laughed heartily and chatted with the soldiers for a while before he wiped his sweat and walked towards Huzi. Huzi immediately took Pang Xiao's clothes and a large towel to welcome him. "Master, you were so awesome just now." Zheng Pei also smiled and put the clothes on Pang Xiao. "Little Wang Yi, you have to take care of your body. If you don't take care of yourself when you're young, what will you do if you get sick when you're old?" Pang Xiao casually wiped his sweat with the large towel and tied his belt as he walked towards the tent. "Mr. Zheng, you don't have to worry. We're used to living in the north. We really don't feel cold in the Yang dynasty's territory, let alone when we exercise." "That's right. Master was so mighty just now. When can I train to be like you? You're so mighty that I feel embarrassed to be your bodyguard." Huzi's eyes shone brightly. After entering the tent, Pang Xiao drank a large bowl of water and felt that his sweat had dissipated. He neatly put on his black battle robe and tied his hair tightly with a belt. The neatly dressed man had a heroic and noble air about him. He was a completely different person from the straightforward and rough man from before. Zheng Pei nodded in satisfaction. Pang Xiao wasn't good at hiding his emotions when he was young. Whether he was happy or not was written all over his face. After so many years of experience, he could change his aura at will. When he was needed to be a rough man, he would be a rough man. When he was needed to be awe-inspiring, he would be awe-inspiring. When he was needed to be unreasonable and shameless, he would not hesitate. It was just that he was always too lazy to speak in front of others. Reporting. Someone outside the tent replied loudly, "Come in." Reporting to the marshal, "There's news from Shihua City. The Yang dynasty's emperor urgently summoned the two generals' son and their families back to the capital. He's replaced them with a general named Wang Hui." Pang Xiao heard this and waved his hand, indicating for the soldier to leave. When there was no one else in the tent, Zheng Pei smiled. "It seems that your Majesty's plan worked. The Yang emperor is really scared out of his wits." Huzi said, "I think that Dog Emperor is a complete idiot. He's greedy for life, afraid of death, and has no brains. It's a pity that Sun Yuanming. Although he once spoke disrespectfully, it was only because he was on a different side. As a weak scholar, he has such integrity. He's a good man worthy of respect." "Master, don't you think so?" Pang Xiao nodded and said, "It's a blessing that he left first." Huzi made a puzzled sound. Zheng Pei thought for a moment and then explained, "Little Wang Yi is right. The Yang emperor is muddle-headed, paranoid, and as timid as a mouse. After reading your Majesty's letter of credence, he must be scared to death. Their Yang dynasty has few talents and their treasury is empty. There's no one who can fight little Wang Yi. The only thing they can do is try their best to make peace." "Make peace?" Huzi blinked and then understood. He stared and said, "Mr. Zheng, you mean that the Yang emperor will make an example of the Sun family?" "Yes, we want Sun Yuanming's brain. Sun Yuanming refused to give it to us. The Yang dynasty's emperor was not only reprimanded by your Majesty, but also threatened. This simple-minded idiot will definitely think of using the Sun family to appease your Majesty's anger." "This idiot?" Huzi laughed. "It's better if he kills all the capable ones. Let those people in their country hate him to death." Listening to the excited conversation between Zheng Pei and Huzi, Pang Xiao thought of the person related to the Sun family. Her family had suffered such a great disaster. Her life in the future should be affected. Pang Xiao was worried about Qin Yining. Even if she was the daughter of his enemy, in his heart, she was always special. Zheng Pei was a shrewd person. Seeing Pang Xiao's expression, he smiled and asked, "What is little Wang Yi thinking about?" Then he asked jokingly, "Could it be that little Wang Yi is thinking about that girl from the family Qin family?" Pang Xiao leaned lazily on the round-backed chair. He smiled and raised his eyebrows at Zheng Pei with a sharp gaze. Zheng Pei felt as if he had lost a piece of flesh from Pang Xiao's glare, but because he was Pang Xiao's strategist, and could be considered half of Pang Xiao's master, he had watched Pang Xiao grow up with his own eyes. Therefore, he did not mince his words. Little Wang Yi, there are many beauties in the world. With your talent, what kind of woman can't you want? Why are you always thinking about Qin Meng's daughter? Could it be that little Wang Yi likes her? When has this king ever said that he likes her? Then what does Wang Yi mean? This king doesn't know yet. He doesn't know. Zheng Pei frowned. Pang Xiao said bluntly, it's because this king doesn't know how he feels about her that he wants to quickly defeat the Yang dynasty. When the time comes, he can keep her by his side and slowly think about it. Huzi stared at Pang Xiao, flabbergasted. You've obviously taken a fancy to her. You already treat her hair clip as a treasure. What else is there to think about? Zheng Pei's expression was very ugly. Little Wang Yi, don't forget how Wang Yi died back then. If it weren't for that bastard Qin Meng, the Pang family wouldn't have ended up like this. When two armies are facing each other, their standpoints are different. No one dies in battle. Pang Xiao tapped the table with his index finger. Although Qin Meng is abominable, isn't it the people who should be blamed the most for suspecting my father? Zheng Pei pursed his lips and didn't say anything. Indeed, if the incapable emperor hadn't been suspicious and used a loophole to sow discord, how could the Pang family really be put to death? To put it bluntly, Pang Zhongzheng's achievements back then were so great that the emperor was afraid of him. Besides, didn't Mr. Zheng already take revenge on Qin Meng back then? Pang Xiao said again. Zheng Pei raised his voice. We just stole a girl. I don't think Qin Meng was very sad. How is that revenge? We wanted to take revenge back then but didn't have the ability, so we had to do this. Now that we have status and power, we can crush them at any time. Naturally, we shouldn't let Qin Meng go. Pang Xiao was angry, but he smiled. Since you know that you will take revenge on Qin Meng in the future, why do you want to make an example of an innocent person? Zheng Pei was speechless for a moment. Just then, a sharp and hoarse voice came from outside the tent. Grand Marshal Pang, I come with your Majesty's secret edict. It was Jianjun Lu. The Emperor of Zhu had sent the head eunuch, Lu Yuan, to supervise the troops. Huzi smiled and went to invite Jianjun Lu in. Military supervisor Lu was in his early 30s. He had a medium build, a delicate and pretty face, and no beard. He bowed slightly to Pang Xiao and respectfully saluted him. He presented the secret decree sealed in wax to Pang Xiao with both hands, and smiled flatteringly. Pang Xiao glanced at Jianjun Lu, opened the envelope, and took out the note inside. There were only 2 words on it: massacre the city. Pang Xiao's expression didn't change. He put down the note. Huzi and Zheng Pei had been paying attention to what was going on. When they saw the 2 words on the note from the corner of their eyes, their hearts skipped a beat. Pang Xiao thought for a moment and asked, is the person who delivered the edict still here? Replying to little Wang Yi, the person has already left. This king understands. I'll have to trouble army supervisor to make this trip. I don't dare. Jianjun Lu smiled and bowed, then respectfully retreated. As soon as he left, Zheng Pei clapped his hands and said with a smile, Your Majesty's brilliant plan. This way, the anger of the people of the Yang dynasty will definitely rise to another level. Pang Xiao pointed in the direction of Shihua city and asked with a smile, how many people are there in the city, women, and children, and the real soldiers? This was a question that already had an answer. The spies of Daeju had already investigated the number of soldiers, citizens, and provisions in Shihua city. Zheng Pei immediately understood what Pang Xiao meant. He disagreed and said, Little Wang Yi, don't be soft-hearted. Besides, a secret edict is still an imperial edict. Chapter 75. Little Wang Yi. Zheng Pei was so angry at Pang Xiao's words that his face and ears turned red. He stomped his feet and said, You can't be so impulsive. You have to consider the overall situation. It's not easy for you to have your current position. Moreover, it's time for you to repair your relationship with your Majesty. If you don't listen to your Majesty's decree, do you know what your Majesty will think? What will your colleagues in the court think? When your Majesty conquered northern Ji, the ministers who surrendered to us in Daeju all hate you. If you take this opportunity to slander your Majesty, I'm afraid you won't be able to maintain your position in your Majesty's heart. What will you do at that time? When the Zhou Emperor conquered northern Ji, Pang Xiao was the vanguard. Pang Xiao did all the killing. In addition, he was ruthless when he avenged his father. In the hearts of many old ministers of northern Ji, Pang Xiao was the main culprit who conquered northern Ji. Although these people surrendered to the Zhou Emperor and some continued to be officials in the court, they hated and feared Pang Xiao in their hearts. It was inevitable that they would do some shady things behind his back. For example, Pang Xiao's reputation was as famous as his military prowess. Some of it was the work of these people. This king understands. Pang Xiao had already calmed down. His voice was firm as he said slowly, "A real man has things to do and things not to do. What's more, this prince is now a sharp blade that can be used. Sooner or later, there will be a day when this prince doesn't fit. Even if this prince disarms and returns to the fields now, do you think that the so-called status, relationship with colleagues, and the instigation of the surrendered subjects will disappear?" Zheng Pei was speechless for a moment. He always knew that Pang Xiao was not stupid. He could see many things clearly, but his way of dealing with it was completely different from what he thought. "Teacher, you also think that nothing will change, right? Since it's not beneficial to the situation, why should this king be afraid of the slightest thing? A general's success is built on 10,000 corpses." This saying was true. But this king does not need the bones of women and children to build this king's glory, splendor, and wealth. "Little Wang Yi, you're too stubborn." Zheng Pei thumped his chest and stamped his feet. He paced back and forth, his face flushed red with anxiety. Spittle flew everywhere as he said, "You're walking on the same path as Wang Yi. I know you have a kind heart and don't want to hurt the innocent, but sometimes what you do doesn't depend on your own will, but the situation forces you to do it. If you disobey the decree, you will be ruining your Majesty's plan. Your Majesty will definitely remember this. Let him be. This king cannot do something that he will regret for the rest of his life because of a moment of fear. This life is very short, especially for a person like me whose head is pinned to his belt. It's a short life to begin with. If I can't live according to my own wishes, then what's the difference between me and a captive animal?" Pang Xiao picked up the weasel hairbrush and motioned for Huzi to grind the ink. Huzi listened to Pang Xiao's words and agreed with his idea. Therefore, he ignored Zheng Pei's objection and went to serve Pang Xiao the brush and ink. Pang Xiao thought for a moment and then wrote a secret letter in a flourish. It didn't take long for him to finish writing it. Zheng Pei read the contents of the letter and anxiously scratched his ears and cheeks. "Do you still want your future career? Disobeying the decree is a crime punishable by death. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. There will definitely be a warning. Holding grudges and guessing are not something that can be done in a day. But I won't lose my life. Go outside and ask around. Who do Daju's soldiers and Tiger Army recognize? Little Wang Yi, you're simply relying on your military achievements and military power to be fearless." "That's right. Anyway, I have military power in my hands. Even if I don't have any thoughts, I'll still be suspected. If I have this ability, why shouldn't I use it?" Pang Xiao casually tossed the brush aside and ordered Huzi, "Go and get someone to send this letter to your Majesty as fast as possible." Huzi nodded and quickly walked out. Zheng Pei angrily slapped his thigh. "Little Wang Yi, you don't care about your career at all." "Indeed, I don't care." This time, Pang Xiao didn't call himself this king. Instead, he confided in Zheng Pei. "I will never do anything that harms innocent people. Otherwise, I won't be able to raise my head when I meet my father in the netherworld. My mother, grandfather, and grandmother always despise my hands for being covered in blood. This time, even if it's for their sake, I won't agree to slaughter everyone in the city." Zheng Pei's lips moved. After a long time, he sighed. "Little Wang Yi, aren't you walking down the same path as Wang Yi? You have to remember how Wang Yi was hated back then. Don't forget what happened in the past. You'll be a teacher for the future. I was born as a human, so I should be a human. I won't do anything that doesn't deserve to be a human, even if a knife is held to my neck." Zheng Pei looked at Pang Xiao's sparkling phoenix eyes. In the end, He just nodded and sighed again. At this time, Qin Yining and the Sun clan were preparing to go to Duke Dinggua's estate. The emperor urgently summoned his eldest uncle, second uncle, two older cousins, and their families to the capital. The Sun clan thought that they would at least be able to see their two older brothers, so they wanted to bring Qin Yining over for them to take a look. Qin Yining was already dressed properly. Together with Mother Jin, he served the Sun clan and put on a warm fox fur hat. When he saw the joy in the Sun clan's eyes, he couldn't help but remind them in advance. Mother, the situation in Duke Dinggua's estate is tense right now. When we go see eldest uncle and second uncle later, we must use our brains and observe the situation. Also, we need to be more tactful when we speak. After all, eldest cousin just passed away, and eldest uncle is still grieving. The Sun clan didn't take Qin Yining's words to heart. Even if they listened, they didn't understand the deeper meaning. They only said, "I know. I haven't seen your eldest uncle and second uncle for many years. I also miss them very much. I don't know how sad they will be when they find out that Brother Ming is no longer around." Qin Yining saw that the Sun clan didn't grasp the main point, so he didn't say anything else. She always felt that the situation wasn't good for her eldest uncle and second uncle to be urgently recalled to the capital. She reminded the Sun clan because she wanted her to pay attention to any abnormalities. If there was a situation, she could immediately think of a solution. When the carriage was ready, Qin Yining and the Sun clan left with Mother Jin and Bing Tang. They first went to Ci Xiao Garden to explain the situation to the old madam. After all, the little new year had just passed, and the family was busy preparing to welcome the new year. Qin Yining smiled and explained that they would be back soon. Seeing Qin Yining's sincere request, the old madam nodded. The carriage drove all the way to Duke Dinggua's estate. Unexpectedly, just as they turned into the long street where Duke Dinggua's estate was located, they saw the estate's gate open from a distance through the carriage window. Soldiers wearing armor and eunuchs wearing grey clothes were escorting a middle-aged man in his 50s, who was wearing a black sable coat and had a medium build, out of the main gate. Qin Yining saw that the situation wasn't right and hurriedly ordered the driver to stop the carriage. "Don't get close. Quickly, back into the alley." Hearing this, the coachman hurriedly obeyed. The Sun clan anxiously said, "What's going on? Who dares to trespass into Duke Dinggua's estate? Mother, let's watch from afar first. Don't make a sound." The Sun clan also knew that the situation was serious, so they nodded. Not long after, heavily armed and armored soldiers escorted many people out. The first person in the lead was Duke Dinggua, who was wearing a dark blue brocade robe. Qin Yining didn't recognize the two men behind him, but he was sure that they were his eldest uncle, Sun Hei, and second uncle, Sun Haijing. Behind them were four young men. Among them, Qin Yining knew fifth cousin and eighth cousin. There were also two slightly older men, who should be second cousin and fourth cousin. Behind them, there were a few boys. The older ones were 7 or 8 years old, and the younger ones were still being carried by servants. They were only 4 or 5 years old. All the men were tied up and tied into a string like dumplings. Behind the men were the womenfolk and maidservants who were also tied up in a string. What's going on? The Sun clan trembled in horror. Duke Dinggua's estate has been raided. Mother, let's go back and ask father about the situation. Qin Yining pressed the Sun clan's mother down and hurriedly ordered the coachman. Chapter 76. The Sun clan had never seen such a frightening scene in their entire lives. They were stunned for a moment, and then their hoarse and sharp voices seemed to be squeezed out of their throats. They anxiously slapped the carriage wall. "Stop the carriage! Stop the carriage! Let me see what's going on." Qin Yining saw this and hurriedly supported the Sun clan. Okay. Mother, don't worry. Let's see what's going on. Once we understand, we can go back and discuss with father how to solve this. Mother, you must calm down. Yes, madam. Fourth young miss is right. We must remain calm. Mother Jin's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Bing Tang's face was pale. She gritted her teeth and said, "I don't know what kind of trouble the incapable ruler is going to cause." The carriage stopped, and several people lifted the curtains and squeezed to look outside. At this time, the matter at Duke Ding's estate had already alarmed the passers-by and the servants of the nearby neighbors. Many people gathered around. Some were simply there to watch the show, while others were full of doubts and indignation. Everyone's discussion was buzzing. They were all wondering how the Duke Ding's estate had fallen to the point of confiscating property after the funeral of his grandson. Qin Yining saw that there were so many people, so he and Mother Jin helped the Sun clan out of the carriage. Several people wore cloaks and hoods tightly and hid behind the crowd to watch from afar. The wide-open door of the estate had been closed with a bang, and the soldiers had put a seal on the door. The masters and servants in the estate were all driven out and tied up in several rows like mules and horses. Duchess Ding, eldest aunt, second aunt, and several masters dressed as daughters-in-law were tied up in a row. Everyone tried their best to support the two pregnant women in the middle. Among them, the pregnant woman was fifth cousin's wife, and the pregnant woman was eighth cousin's wife. But even with the support of the people beside them, the two of them didn't look very good. Fifth cousin and eighth cousin, who were standing in the front row, were so anxious that they frequently turned back to ask questions. When the soldiers saw this, they first looked at a man in his 50s who was wearing a black sable fur cloak. Seeing him pouting his lips, the soldier understood and swung his scabbard at fifth cousin and eighth cousin a few times. Immediately, there was a big cut on their heads and faces, and blood flowed down along their cheeks. Confiscating property. Who allowed you to speak? Ah! Stop hitting them. The womenfolk screamed. Don't touch my grandson. Duke Ding roared and used his body to push those people away. Although his hands were tied behind his back, he was like a towering mountain, in front of his grandson. First uncle and second uncle angrily kicked and knocked the soldiers who had attacked them to the ground. The crowd suddenly became chaotic, and the onlookers were also pointing and whispering. Hit you. Hit is a light punishment. Cao Bingzhong. How dare you let people? It turned out that the leader was Cao Guozhong. His Majesty has entrusted this matter to me. What I do is entirely up to me, but EU. Why are they like quails waiting to be slaughtered now? After a moment of silence, someone mustered the courage to say indignantly, what crime did Duke Dingwa commit? Yes, why do they want to confiscate Duke Ding's property? It must be the demon empress who instigated it. This person is the demon empress' father. He is not a good person. When someone spoke, someone else agreed. Although people had the heart to seek benefits and avoid harm, once their emotions were stirred up, they would not care so much about what they said. What's more, the law did not punish the majority. These people did not do anything heartless. They just whispered. They did not believe that these people could arrest them. Cao Guozhong glared at the crowd angrily. The soldiers immediately understood and went forward to push the crowd. Shut up. Do you all want to be buried with them? Several people in front were pushed, and the people behind were also squeezed. Qin Yining and Mother Jin supported the Sun clan, and Bing Tang supported Qin Yining. The four of them supported each other, but they were still pushed to the ground. Seeing the soldiers take action, the common people quieted down. Cao Guozhong raised the corner of his mouth and said mockingly, Sun Dicheng, do you think you still have the right to speak now? Your residence is full of traitors and traitors. The emperor is already furious. Do you still want to incite the common people to cause chaos? Turning around, Cao Guozhong said loudly to the common people, Daju originally extended an olive branch to us. As long as Sun Yuanming was willing to offer his brain to treat the Empress Dowager of Daju, perhaps our crisis could be resolved. However, the good grandson taught by Sun Dicheng actually disobeyed the emperor's decree. The emperor has not investigated the crime of disobeying the emperor's decree. Now, Daju is furious. Prince Zhongxian's tiger army is pressuring the border. If they really break into Shihua city, how can the common people of the capital city be safe? This is all caused by Sun Dicheng and his family. Bah! Shameless. He is obviously an incapable ruler who is greedy for life and afraid of death. The crowd whispered. Qin Yining and the Sun clan were in the crowd, so they heard it clearly. Cao Guozhong didn't care at all. He looked at Duke Dingwa's family and said, the emperor has no other choice. Daju's national letters are everywhere. For the sake of the common people of Dayan, he can only punish your family. I don't believe it. Even if the emperor wants the lives of my Sun family, I want to hear the emperor's decree. I don't believe that our Sun family is full of loyal officials. My grandson has shown his ambition for the country. My son has fought on the battlefield. In the end, this is the outcome. You want to hear the emperor's decree? But the emperor won't see you. Duke Dingwa's face turned purple. Cao Bingzhong, you treacherous villain. You taught your daughter to seduce the emperor and specially instigate the emperor to do improper things. You are also a traitor to the country. Aren't you afraid of retribution? Ha ha ha. Cao Guozhong laughed loudly and clapped his hands. My retribution hasn't come yet, but yours, Sun Ducheng's, has. Then, with a serious face, he raised his voice and said, Son, you disobeyed the emperor's decree and offended his superiors. Duke Dingwa's family is disloyal and instigated the relationship between the two countries. Daju and Dayan can't be at peace. All the men of Duke Dingwa's mansion, regardless of age, are to be beheaded and executed 3 days later at noon. The women are to be sold to the musical house immediately. The servants of Duke Dingwa's mansion will be sold at the end of the long street in 3 days. All the property under Duke Dingwa's name will be confiscated and confiscated. After a moment of silence, the scene suddenly became noisy. Duke Dingwa was stunned in place. Duchess Dingwa's eyes were blank for a moment, and then she screamed, No. Eldest uncle shouted, Your Majesty, you can't be blinded by treacherous officials. I, Sun Haijin, have fought for the country all my life. My son is loyal and full of enthusiasm for serving the country. But you want my son's brain to sue for peace. Now you want the lives of my whole family. My youngest nephew is only 5 years old. Your Majesty, the child is innocent. Please have mercy, Your Majesty. Even if Duke Dingwa's family is not favored by the emperor, what does a 5-year-old child know? We don't deserve to die. Your Majesty, please leave a trace of the Sun family's bloodline. The sad cries of eldest uncle and second uncle caused an uproar among the people, and they all loudly scolded the incapable emperor. Cao Guozhong sneered, Your Majesty is wise. It's true that you have disloyal hearts. Look, you can incite ignorant people to scold the emperor with just a few words. He waved his hand casually, and several eunuchs and soldiers rushed to the crowd. They grabbed the young man who had shouted the loudest just now and chopped him with a knife. This knife cut the young man's neck. Blood splashed high, and the body fell to the ground with a plop. The crowd immediately fell silent. Cao Guozhong turned to look at the onlookers. If anyone talks nonsense again, he will be guilty of treason. How could the people dare to speak again? None of them dared to speak out. Duke Dingwa's eyes were red, and 2 lines of tears gushed out. Your Majesty, you betrayed my Sun family and Dayan's loyal officials. Your Majesty, aren't you afraid that your officials will be bitterly disappointed? Shut up. Put the men in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, and send all the women to the musical house. Take them all away. Yes, Master. Duchess Ding choked with sobs. Duke Dingwa looked back at his old wife. They all knew that after this farewell, they would never see each other again. Paisian, I'm sorry for you. No, Master, you are a hero, a good man. I'm satisfied to be able to follow you all my life. Duchess Ding choked with sobs. Eldest aunt, second aunt, and several cousin-in-laws all crazily called for their husbands, and the 2 sides struggled to get close to each other. Eldest uncle and second uncle fell to their knees with tears in their eyes. Because they were tied into a string, the men all knelt down together with them. Your son is unfilial. Farewell, mother. Eldest uncle and second uncle saluted, and several cousins also kowtowed to eldest aunt and second aunt. Eldest aunt wailed, and second aunt roared crazily. It was hard to hear what she was saying, but she was half crazy. Among the men who were beheaded, her second branch had the most people, and among them was her 5-year-old grandson. This heart-wrenching scene caused an uproar among the onlookers once again. The Sun clan couldn't hold it in anymore. They shook off Qin Yining and Mother Jin's hands like crazy, pushed through the crowd, and rushed forward. Father, eldest brother, second brother, Qin Yining and Mother Jin also rushed out. Seeing that the soldiers wanted to stop the Sun Clan, Qin Yining was afraid that the Sun Clan would be at a disadvantage, so he stood beside the Sun Clan and used his arms and back to block the soldiers' push. However, the three of them were still blocked by the soldiers and couldn't move an inch. Duke Dingwa, eldest uncle, second uncle, and the cousins all turned their heads and looked at the Sun Clan and Qin Yining with tears in their eyes. Grandfather, eldest uncle, second uncle. Since they had already shown their faces, there was no point in hiding anymore. Qin Yining knelt on the spot and saluted. Duke Dingwa looked at Qin Yining and the Sun Clan and didn't say anything. Eldest uncle and second uncle cried and laughed. This is Sister Han's daughter, right? Take good care of your mother. Eldest uncle, second uncle, don't worry. Qin Yining supported the Sun Clan. The Sun Clan's forehead was pressed against the bluestone tiles, and she sobbed loudly. Father, I don't want you to die. Eldest brother, second brother, I don't want you to die. Cao Guozhong first glared at the Sun Clan and Qin Yining, but because the Sun Clan was already married and her husband was Grand Preceptor Qin, he didn't dare to move. He only ordered in a deep voice, "What are you waiting for? Take them away." After saying that, he got into the carriage and left first. When the soldiers and eunuchs heard this, they were about to separate the women from the men and take them away, one on the left and one on the right. Finally, they were about to leave, and their tightly clenched hands were about to be forcefully separated. Duke Dingwa looked at his old wife expectantly and said, "Patient, take the children and live on." Duchess Dingwa's eyes were covered with tears, and she nodded hard. Fifth cousin shouted anxiously, "Grandmother, please take care of Shuang-er. Shuang-er, don't cry. Give birth to our child and live well. Husband, husband." Fifth cousin's wife held her belly that was about to give birth and refused to let go of fifth cousin's hand. In the chaos, she was pulled by the soldiers and fell to the ground. She covered her belly and cried out in pain. She was forcibly dragged away, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. Fifth cousin's eyes were about to pop out. His child. Qin Yining couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed the soldier who was blocking her to the ground. No one expected that a young lady would have so much strength. Someone wanted to draw his sword, but he was stopped by an informed eunuch. This is the young lady of Grand Preceptor Qin's family. However, these people didn't dare to draw their swords, but there were still 3 or 4 strong men who stopped Qin Yining and didn't let him get close. Qin Yining had to say loudly, "Cousin, don't worry." Hearing this, Duke Dingwa, first uncle, second uncle, and several cousins all looked at Qin Yining. There were tears in Qin Yining's eyes, but his eyes were very firm. "I'll go to the musical house right now." Zhao Yun Agency, which specialized in renting convicts from the musical house, was now Qin Yining's industry. Duke Dingwa smiled and nodded heavily. Qin Yining also nodded. Finally, he looked at fifth cousin and eighth cousin and turned to leave. Chapter 77. Qin Yining rushed to Madame Sun, who was kneeling on the ground and crying, and helped her up by force. "Mother, you go home first. I'm going to lodge a complaint. I'm going to the Ministry of Justice's prison." Why? Sun Clan sobbed and shook her head. "Because it's an imperial edict. The imperial edict was issued by His Majesty. Who are you going to lodge a complaint with?" Qin Yining held Sun Clan's shoulders with both hands. He exerted a little force and lowered his voice. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. "Mother, the imperial edict has been issued, and it can't be reversed. We're just women, and we're also members of the family Qin. Our actions will affect the life and death of our family Qin. Mother, do you want everyone in the family Qin to be buried with grandfather and the others? How can you be so cold-blooded?" Sun Clan looked at Qin Yining in disbelief and pushed her with both hands. "Do you want me to watch your grandfather and the others die?" This time, Qin Yining stood firmly in the same place. He didn't let go of Sun Clan's strength like before. Instead, he tightly held Sun Clan's shoulders with both hands. She was in so much pain that she frowned and even forgot to cry. "Yes, perhaps I'm cold-blooded. Although I grew up in the mountains all these years, I also survived in the marketplace when I was young. I've experienced real life and death and seen the good side of human nature. But more than that, I've seen the true and ugly side of human nature. Disaster is imminent. Even if my father has the intention to help Ding General Manor, is His Majesty someone who will listen to advice? Mother, think about it. Father is also the pillar of the family. Will he go against the rules and put his family on the fire to roast? My father is the imperial tutor of the dynasty, but he can't do it. Mother, a noble lady, how can you do it? If you do anything now, you'll only be putting your family Qin in danger. The members of the Sun clan stared blankly at Qin Yining, tears welling up in their eyes again. Then, we can only watch as your grandfather, uncle, and cousin are beheaded. Your third cousin's youngest son is only 5 years old. Tears welled up in Qin Yining's eyes. Mother, this is reality. Listen to me. Go back to the Fu now. Claim that you are sick and refuse to see anyone. If old madam wants to see you, you can't talk back to old madam anymore. Mother, you have to recognize the reality. You don't have a maternal family in the future. She no longer had her maiden family. He had no one to back him up. The Sun clan had been the pride and reliance of the Sun clan these past few years. Whenever she quarreled with the old madam and Qin Huayuan, she would often bring up her maternal family and her father. From now on, there would be no one to back her up. Her maiden family had fallen. When Qin Yining saw that the members of the Sun clan were in a daze, he knew that his words had some effect. He hurriedly instructed Mother Jin. First, help madam return to the Fu. You must advise madam not to have a direct conflict with old madam or anyone else. Everything can be discussed after I return home. The Sun clan's matter will soon be known by everyone. Family Qin's situation will soon change. Yes, fourth young Miss Mother Jin nodded heavily. For the first time, she deeply felt that even if madam didn't have old master's favor, even if madam lost her maternal family's support, as long as fourth young miss was there, they still had a backbone. Qin Yining instructed the coachman to untie a horse. He turned around and said, I'm going to look for Master Zhong. I might be a bit late. Go back and help me. Bing Tang nodded. Yes. Young miss, don't worry. I will also serve madam well. Qin Yining shook the reins and urged the horse to leave. Qin Yining didn't learn any riding skills, but he had dealt with wild horses and had ridden wild horses before. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for him to control such a domesticated horse. Soon, he arrived at Master Zhong's house. Master Zhong wasn't home. Seeing that Qin Yining had arrived, the servant immediately rushed to Yu Shengin to look for shopkeeper Zhong. At this time, shopkeeper Zhong also knew that something had happened at Duke Ding's Fu. After hearing the servant's message, he quickly rushed home. Without Qin Yining saying anything, he already knew what she was going to do. Boss, don't worry. I'll go get the cash now. No matter what, I'll go to the musical house to rent out the old boss and the womenfolk. Qin Yining saw that Master Zhong's expression was sincere and that he wasn't afraid of getting into trouble. She felt very comforted and grateful. Then I'll have to trouble Master Zhong. Although I'm anxious, what's more important is whether you can immediately send a doctor and midwife to the musical house. My fifth cousin-in-law is about to give birth. I'm afraid that my eighth cousin-in-law's fetus will be affected. Master Zhong was shocked when he heard this and quickly nodded. Okay. Our Zhaoyun agency has a lot of connections. I'll arrange it right away. Mingjie, stay here and listen to your orders. Saving people is as important as putting out a fire. I'll go first. Okay. I'll leave everything to you, Master Zhong. Qin Yining nodded and thanked him. Master Zhong waved his hand and ran out as if his butt was on fire. Qin Yining walked Master Zhong to the door and watched him go away in a hurry. She sat down with a frown. A man in his early 30s had been standing with his head down. Qin Yining finally had time to look at him. He was of medium height, wearing a cotton jacket and a hat. His face was honest and his eyes were sharp. Sensing Qin Yining's gaze, the man saluted. Hello, Master. I'm Jing Mingjie. My mother works in the kitchen. So it was him. When Qin Yining was locked up in the ancestral hall, it was Mother Jing who came to deliver food and pass on a message. Later, Mother Jing came to pass on a message to her. At that time, she told Qin Yining that she had a son who was Master Zhong's third shopkeeper. So it's shopkeeper Jing. You flatter me, you flatter me. Thank you for taking care of me. I can follow Master Zhong and learn how to do things. Jing Mingjie saluted. Qin Yining knew that Master Zhong had a sense of propriety. The person who was arranged to work for her must be someone she trusted very much. She didn't doubt the people she used, so Qin Yining directly asked, Zhao Yun Agency originally had 2 brothels. One was changed into a restaurant, and the other is empty. Is that property useful? Master, that property is useless. We only left someone to look after the house. Qin Yining calculated the number of women in Duke Ding's household and thought about the size of the 2 inns under Zhao Yun Agency. It wasn't appropriate to arrange for them to stay in the inns. First, they couldn't stay in the inns. Second, it wasn't safe with so many people coming and going. If she wanted to rent them, she needed a place to stay. Her grandmother's family didn't have a male heir, so she couldn't separate them. After thinking about it, the only vacant property in Zhao Yun Agency that could accommodate all the women of the Sun family was the property that was originally used as a brothel. Shopkeeper Jing, I'll have to trouble you to arrange for people to clean up the house and arrange for the bedding, clothes, and other daily necessities. Just record the expenses and report to Master Zhong. Jing Mingjie understood Qin Yining's meaning and said, Master, you want to arrange for the women of the Sun family to stay there? That's appropriate. The house has been cleaned up and is suitable for people to live in. However, we still need to arrange for some guards to go there. Don't worry, Master. I'll give the order now. Qin Yining nodded and asked Jing Mingjie to go quickly. She waited for the news in Master Zhong's study in the outer courtyard. Master Zhong didn't come back until it was dark. As soon as he entered the door, he said, Fortunately, we went there in time. If we were a little later, I'm afraid that grandmother and her unborn child would have died. She just gave birth to a baby girl. Mother and daughter are safe. I've already arranged for the musical house. They can all be brought here tomorrow. Qin Yining finally felt relieved. He bowed a few times in the air and said gratefully, Thank you, Master Zhong. What are you talking about, Master? My family's lives were saved by you. What's more, my old master used to treat me well. Master, you are a righteous woman. What you did was righteous. I really have no reason to stand by and do nothing. Qin Yining stood up and thought for a while. He said, Zhao Yun Agency has such a wide network. Can you have a say in the prison of the Ministry of Justice? If you can, at least send a message to my grandfather. Tell them that my 5th cousin-in-law gave birth to a daughter safely. Speaking of this, Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh. It's a girl. That's good. If she gave birth to a son. He was afraid that the emperor wouldn't even let go of a newborn. Master Zhong also sighed after hearing this. The matter of Duke Ding's mansion has been spread all over the capital. Everyone knows in private that Duke Ding's family has been wronged. Many scholars who used to admire the talents of Duke Ding's descendants have begun to jointly write a petition. I hope that the emperor will listen to the voices of the people and deal with them leniently. I hope so. Qin Yining had some hope in his heart. However, when he carefully recalled what Guozhong Cao had said today and analyzed the emperor's character, his hope showed signs of being shattered. I'm afraid that the emperor will think that Duke Ding's family specializes in inciting the people and will be even more afraid. Master Zhong's expression turned cold. His heart was also hanging. Qin Yining arranged the matters here and told Master Zhong that he had ordered Jing Mingjie to tidy up the residence for the Sun family's womenfolk to live in. Then, he was going to return to his mansion. He had been out for a day today. His mother had gone home early. He didn't know if something would happen in the face of such a huge change. Moreover, Qin Yining knew that the old madam was a snobbish person who was the best at seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. In the past, she had been tolerant of the Sun clan mostly because the Sun clan was supported by Duke Ding's mansion. Now that Duke Ding's mansion had been condemned, the old madam would probably be afraid and hate everyone related to Duke Ding's mansion. She was worried that it would bring disaster to the family Qin. Not to mention that the Sun clan's status in the family Qin would plummet. Even her, the granddaughter who had obtained the Sun family's property, would probably be feared by the old madam. Moreover, she had immediately rented out the Sun family's womenfolk to raise. In the past, she had worked hard to gain the old madam's favor. She was afraid that this matter would wipe her clean overnight. However, she didn't regret it. She also didn't feel that it was a pity. Even if the old madam was tired of her, she could still live a good life. She couldn't disregard the lives of the womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion just to please the old madam. She rented them out not to show kindness, but to help her mother fulfill her filial duties. It was also for the kinship that Duke Ding's mansion gave her. Qin Yining returned to the mansion. As soon as he entered, he was stopped by Chi Tai, who was waiting at the gatehouse. "Fourth young lady, you're back. Master ordered me to wait here for fourth young lady. Master asked you to go to the study as soon as you came back. He said that he has something to say to you." Chapter 78. Qin Yining was actually very nervous. She wasn't sure about her father's attitude towards the Duke Ding's matter. Her father was a calm, reserved, and resourceful official. This kind of person was definitely not a soft-hearted person. She must save the Sun family's womenfolk. She wasn't afraid of Dowager Duchess opposition because no matter how much Dowager Duchess opposed it, she wouldn't be able to obstruct her actions. But her father was different. If her father was determined to oppose her, he would definitely have a way to control her actions. She nervously followed Chi Tai to the outer courtyard study. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw two beautiful maidservants wearing light blue fine cotton coats waiting in the corridor. They were Mo Xiong and Dan Qing. When they saw Qin Yining, the two of them curtsied. One entered the room to pass the message while the other came to greet her. "Greetings, fourth Miss Master ordered us to wait here for you." "Thank you, Sister Dan Qing." Dan Qing carefully lifted the dark green bamboo curtain for Qin Yining. Qin Yining nodded and smiled before entering the study. Qin Huayuan was wearing a light grey Taoist robe and a dark blue brocade jacket with a grey mouse fur collar draped over his shoulders. He was sitting cross-legged on the black arhat bed next to the window, reading a book. "You're back. Come and sit down." Qin Huayuan flipped a page of the book. Qin Yining first performed a thorough etiquette before sitting down on the other side of the arhat bed. She took the tea that Mo Xiong brought and placed it on the small table beside her. The maidservants all retreated. Qin Huayuan was still reading. He was multitasking and asked, "What did you do today? Tell me." Although Qin Yining was already mentally prepared, her heart still couldn't help but skip a beat. She hurriedly got up and bowed her head as she replied, "Father, I heard that eldest uncle and second uncle had returned today. I was going to pay my respects to them. I didn't expect that when I arrived at the gate of the Duke's mansion with Mother, I would encounter the confiscation of property." "Yes." Qin Huayuan gently put the book button on the small table. The cover was written with the words Zhuozhuan. Cao Guizhong took people to search the house and announced that all the men of the Sun family, regardless of their age, would be beheaded, the women would be escorted to the Jiaotong, and the servants would be sold in 3 days. The onlookers were in an uproar, and Cao Guizhong even ordered people to kill a commoner on the spot to stop the discussion. Qin Huayuan asked, "And then?" Later, Cao Guizhong gave the order to take them away. Grandfather, grandmother, uncle, aunt, cousin, and cousin-in-law were separated forever. The scene was very. Mother cried sadly. "We were seen by Cao Guizhong." Although Qin Yining avoided the important and dwelling on the trivial, he had no choice but to tell his father that Cao Guizhong had discovered them. If anything happened, he would be mentally prepared. Qin Huayuan pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "What about you? You didn't do anything after that." Qin Huayuan's voice was low and gentle, as if there was a smile in it, but Qin Yining clearly felt a chill run down his spine. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted. "Father, please calm down." At that time, fifth cousin and fifth cousin-in-law were a young couple, and they didn't want to separate. The scene was really pitiful. When the soldiers tore at each other, fifth cousin-in-law was pushed and fell, which affected the baby. "Father, you also know that the Sun family was wronged. I really couldn't watch fifth cousin-in-law lose her life like that. Therefore, I immediately ordered people to use my connections to save fifth cousin-in-law's life. Fortunately, fifth cousin-in-law gave birth to a baby girl. Qin Yining quickly glanced at Qin Huayuan, but Qin Huayuan's expression was the same from beginning to end, making people unable to see whether he was happy or angry. Qin Yining had to continue speaking sincerely. As for the matter of renting the house, I don't think there's any harm in it. Since the emperor has decreed that the Sun family's convicts should enter the Jiaofu as slaves or maids, what is waiting for is the rental of Zhao Yun agency. There's no other family in the imperial court that has the right to enter the Jiaofu, right? Unless the emperor is so negligent that he doesn't know that Zhao Yun agency has already been given to me. The emperor really doesn't know. It's estimated that the emperor is already regretting it. When he confiscated the Duke Dinggua's estate, he must have been thinking about the business of Zhao Yun agency. Qin Huayuan coughed, then said softly, impudent. Although his voice wasn't loud, the majesty in his words wasn't lacking. Qin Yining hurriedly kowtowed, yes. Daughter knows her mistake, I shouldn't talk about the emperor behind his back. Qin Huayuan was amused by her appearance, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He forced himself not to let the corners of his mouth curl up. Are you saying that it's wrong to only talk about the emperor? Qin Yining pursed her lips. When she raised her head, her clear eyes were like a clear spring. She looked at Qin Huayuan with confusion. I didn't disobey the emperor's decree, nor did I do anything excessive. The emperor rules the world with benevolence and filial piety. Even if Duke Dinggua is guilty, there's no reason to ignore the matter of a convict giving birth to a child. I think that even if I don't do anything, the emperor will send someone to save fifth cousin-in-law when he knows. What's more, I'm the owner of Zhao Yun agency. There's a new convict in the Jiaofu, and my Zhao Yun agency is short of manpower. There's nothing wrong with renting her. Isn't the rule of renting people in Zhao Yun agency set by the royal family? You little girl. Qin Huayuan picked up Zhuan and gently patted Qin Yining's forehead. The reason is all yours. It didn't hurt at all. There was a touch of doting in it. Qin Yining touched her forehead. When she looked at Qin Huayuan again, the admiration in her eyes almost turned into a hot spring and soaked Qin Huayuan in it. Qin Huayuan felt warm in his heart and said, "Get up. Danqing just ordered people to prepare osmanthus sugar cake. Have some with me." Qin Yining was not picky about food. She liked to eat everything. But osmanthus sugar cake was her favorite. She didn't expect her father to know. And he even considered that she was busy today and didn't have time to eat. Qin Yining was very moved. She smiled and said yes. Then she got up and sat in the seat just now. Danqing and Moxiang came in with all kinds of pastries and gently put them on the small table. Qin Huayuan first picked up a piece of osmanthus sugar cake. Seeing this, Qin Yining also picked up a piece and took a bite. It was fragrant and soft, but not overly sweet. The sweet and delicious taste made her feel much better after a day of tenseness. She couldn't help but feel hungry. She ate 4 pieces in a row and drank a cup of tea. Only then did she feel a little better. When she looked up, she saw that Qin Huayuan was just holding the piece of cake. He didn't eat it. Instead, he smiled and watched her eat. Qin Yining immediately understood that Qin Huayuan was afraid that if he didn't eat, she wouldn't dare to eat either. That was why he picked up a piece for show. "Father." Qin Yining was moved and called out to him. The girl's bright and clear almond-shaped eyes were moist. His heart couldn't help but soften when he looked at her. Her charming appearance was familiar. She was so similar to himself when he saw himself in the mirror when he was young. Such an intelligent and lovely child was the only bloodline he could possibly have in this lifetime. She was the only continuation of his life. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but pat her head. Her eyes were full of surprise and joy. She even instinctively rubbed against his palm like a small animal. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but laugh. So there was this kind of joy in taking care of a child. His daughter was already 14 years old when she came home. She was at an age where marriage could be discussed. However, in Qin Huayuan's eyes, she was just a smart and cunning child. If the world was peaceful, Qin Huayuan wouldn't mind his daughter causing trouble. If his daughter was naughty and got into trouble outside, she would come home crying to him. He could use his ability to help her solve her problems. Then, he would receive her adoration and admiration. How wonderful would that be? Unfortunately, she was born at the wrong time. Are you full? Qin Huayuan asked when he saw that Qin Yining wasn't eating. Qin Yining nodded. Her cheeks were red. Qin Huayuan said solemnly, although what you've done today is impeccable in terms of morality and reason, you've forgotten what kind of situation you're in right now. Qin Yining lowered her head and said honestly, Father, I didn't forget. It's just that you wanted to do it, so you did it. Yes. Qin Yining nodded and said, I just didn't want to do something that went against my conscience. I didn't want to live in regret and guilt for the rest of my life. I know I was taking a risk, but I believe that His Majesty is also a person who cherishes his reputation. Even if he wants to find fault with us, he will find an honorable reason to let himself stand on the moral high ground. I thought about it and felt that there was nothing wrong with it. That's why I took action. It's not that I didn't consider our family's situation. Qin Yining glanced at Qin Huayuan. Seeing that his expression remained the same, she continued, Moreover, I am Father's daughter. Father is now the Grand Preceptor of the Crown Prince. If something happened to my maternal grandmother's family and I didn't do anything when I clearly had the ability to save fifth cousin-in-law, how would the world talk about our family? How would they talk about Father? Wouldn't we become ingrates who are greedy for life and afraid of death? Daughter doesn't want Father's reputation, which has been pure for his entire life, to be tainted because of a moment of fear. Qin Huayuan was silent for a moment. He didn't say anything. He didn't reprimand Qin Yining, nor did he blame her for her mistakes. After a while, he finally said, What do you plan to do next? Qin Yining saw that Qin Huayuan didn't object. Her hanging heart finally relaxed. In her heart, she was even more certain of her father's character and worshipped him. She knew that if Qin Huayuan didn't want her to save fifth cousin-in-law, he had 10,000 ways to erase what she had done so that no one would be able to use it against them. Since her father didn't stop her, it meant that he tacitly approved of her actions and would help her deal with the aftermath. However, there were some things that she could do, but Qin Huayuan's position wasn't convenient for him to do. Qin Yining was somewhat excited. Her mind was also active. After thinking for a while, she said, replying to Father, the next most important thing is Mother. Then there is the execution in 3 days. If the Emperor doesn't give orders, the people who are executed in this dynasty will be thrown into a mass grave. He didn't say that people can't help collect the corpses. Upon hearing this, Qin Huayuan said, I thought you would ask me to beg the Emperor for mercy and let go of the male members of your maternal grandfather's family. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, It's easy for me to beg you, but it won't be easy for you to beg the Emperor. The Emperor was frightened by Da Ju's letter of credence. He must find a way to appease Da Ju's anger. The Sun family was unlucky enough to bump into the knife's edge. The Emperor had already made up his mind to cut them down. When a person was afraid, one side of the scale was their own life and the other side was other people's lives. Naturally, they would choose to protect themselves. Even if Qin Huayuan went and talked until his mouth was broken, it would be useless. He might even get himself into trouble. If he didn't handle it well, he might even harm his entire family. Qin. Chapter 79. Qin Huayuan had come into contact with many people as an official in the imperial court, but there weren't many people like Qin Yining, who happened to have the same thoughts as him and could understand his thoughts without him saying anything. She was his daughter after all. Not only was her appearance and behavior similar to his, but she was also very intelligent. Qin Huayuan was very happy in his heart and said with a warm expression, You actually understand Father's difficulties. Qin Yining said seriously, Father was able to reach such a high position as an official under the Emperor. I'm afraid that even when you sleep, you have to keep one eye open. It's really taxing on your mind. You are the head of the family. If you are negligent, our family will be like the Duke of Dinggua's family. Sometimes when daughter thinks about it, daughter worries about father's hardships and pressure. It's a pity that daughter is a daughter and can't share father's worries. Seeing her mature appearance at such a young age, Qin Huayuan felt that his daughter was very cute. The words she said were the words that touched his heart the most. In this family, not to mention the old madam, even his 2 younger brothers only saw him as a mountain that would never fall. Sometimes, what a man wanted wasn't how much help his family could give him. Just understanding of his efforts and difficulties was enough to warm his heart. Since the discussion had been settled, Qin Huayuan said, "Later, go pay respects to your grandmother. If she asks you anything, answer her properly." Qin Yining understood that Qin Huayuan was afraid that she would talk back to the old madam and offend the old madam. "Yes, daughter understands." Qin Huayuan nodded in satisfaction and said, "Go back now and properly persuade your mother. She must be very sad." Qin Yining complied. Just as she stood up and bowed, Qi Tai's voice came from outside, "Master, someone from the palace came. They said that the emperor summoned you for an urgent matter. They asked Master to quickly enter the palace." Qin Huayuan faintly said, "I know." Qin Yining's heart trembled. "Father, about the Zhao Yun agency. Father has his own plans. You can go. His Majesty won't punish you, right?" Qin Yining was very worried. If what she had would harm her family, she would rather not have it. Qin Huayuan poked Qin Yining's forehead and said, "You're a child, so you should do something that only a child should do. You're still young, so don't worry so much. Go and greet your grandmother." Qin Yining rarely heard such an affectionate tone from an elder. She immediately blushed, and her misty eyes curved into 2 crescent moons. She obediently bowed to Qin Huayuan and retreated. Qin Huayuan watched as Qin Yining walked away, then he ordered Qi Tai to prepare a carriage. Qin Yining hurried back to Ci Xiao Garden. Before she reached the front door, she saw a young maidservant squatting on the steps from afar. When she saw her, the maidservant jumped up and ran into the courtyard. She thought it was strange, so she stopped walking and continued walking. Just as she stepped on the steps, she saw Mammy Qin quickly walking out with a lamp. Qin Yining understood in an instant. She greeted Mammy Qin and asked euphemistically, "Mammy Qin, does old madam have any orders?" Mammy Qin bent her knees and curtsied. Qin Yining also curtsied in return. The 2 went to the side. Mammy Qin lowered her voice and said, "Old madam is not in a good mood. She just took medicine and is sulking. Today, the matter of Duke Ding's family has spread. Old madam was worried and advised First Madam. Perhaps First Madam was in a bad mood and contradicted Old Madam. In anger, Old Madam ordered people to lock First Madam in the ancestral hall to reflect on her mistakes. Fourth Miss, when you see Old Madam later, be careful." Qin Yining was a bit surprised. She wasn't surprised that the Sun clan was muddle-headed, but she was surprised that Old Madam was so snobbish. Old Madam didn't like the Sun clan for a day or 2. In the past, she had always endured it, but now, she couldn't endure it for even a day. "Thank you, Mammy Qin. I understand. Although Mother is impulsive, her heart isn't bad. Moreover, when encountering this kind of matter, no one would be able to remain calm. There were some who spoke without thinking and offended Old Madam. Old Madam is wholeheartedly concerned about our family and the entire clan. Sigh, it's also hard on Old Madam." Upon hearing this, Mammy Qin smiled and said, "I also advised Old Madam like this. With Mammy Qin by Old Madam's side, she's much more reliable than us little girls. When we encounter a problem, we panic." These words were very useful to Mammy Qin. She walked through the door with Qin Yining. Along the way, she had a smile on her face and couldn't help but raise her chin. Qin Yining suppressed the sadness and panic in her heart and forced a smile on her face. The elderly were superstitious. She was afraid that the family Qin would be implicated by Duke Ding's family. If she continued to cry, what could be done? Old Madam. After entering the door, Qin Yining walked around the black-painted screen and entered the inner room. She bowed properly. Old Madam was holding a slender brass pipe and smoking. When she saw Qin Yining come in, she frowned and said in a deep voice, "Why did you come back so late? Where did you go? Don't learn from your mother. Even now, you still can't distinguish between the inside and the outside. Although your maternal family is good to you and gives you money and business, you have the blood of the family Qin flowing in your body. You are still a person of the family Qin. Don't think that you can do anything after inheriting your maternal family's business. It's just a drop in the bucket for them. You're just a little girl with long hair and short knowledge. What do you know? You can be so grateful now. Aren't you afraid of getting into trouble and implicating our Fu? Qin Yining's heart was in a knot because of the questions of unscrupulous economics that were hurled at her. Even if Zhao Yun Agency was a drop in the bucket for the Sun family in the past, wasn't it important to the family Qin? Why didn't old madam give it to her? However, Qin Yining knew that old madam's temperament was like this. After all, she was her grandmother. Could she kill her? Old madam is right. Granddaughter came back long ago. It's just that father asked me to go to the study in the outer courtyard and talked for a long time. It was delayed, so I didn't come to greet you immediately. Qin Yining obediently admitted her mistake. She actually scolded the wrong person. Old madam was full of anger, but she encountered such a soft rebuff. She couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. How could Qin Yining wait for the old madam to admit defeat? Wasn't that waiting for her to bear a grudge? Thus, she immediately gave her a way out. It's all granddaughter's fault for making grandmother worry. Today, Ding General Manor had this incident, and Da Ju's letter of credence was posted all over the streets. Someone was even killed by Cao Guizhong on the street. Right now, it's a chaotic time outside. Granddaughter really shouldn't have returned late. It's just that there was an urgent business matter, so I went to see Master Zhong and asked about the accounts. That's why I came back a little late. Old madam, please forgive me. Old madam felt that she could get over it on the surface, and her heart felt much better. Ian, it's good that you know your mistake. Stand up and talk. Unknowingly, she had forgotten the words she wanted to scold at the beginning. Qin Yining stood up with a smile and took the beauty hammer to massage old madam's legs. She only asked some topics such as whether old madam's dinner was delicious or not. He didn't have the slightest intention of pleading for leniency for the Sun clan. When old madam saw this, her heart felt even better. Right at this moment, the head maidservant Ji Xiong rushed in with a pale face. Old madam. Something happened outside. What happened? Don't be so flustered. Don't startle old madam. Mammy Qin reprimanded. Ji Xiong looked at Qin Yining. Her eyes were full of complicated feelings and pity. She knelt down and said, Old madam, the men of the Sun family were all pulled out and beheaded just now, including young Master Biao, who's only 5 years old. Old madam was shocked. The tobacco pipe and pot in her hand fell to the ground, and the ashes scattered all over the floor. What did you say? Didn't they behead him in 3 days? Chapter 80. Old madam was frightened and took a step back in a trance. She accidentally stepped on the pedal and fell on the Arhat bed. Old madam. Mammy Qin hurriedly supported her. Qin Yining also subconsciously supported her. If one looked carefully at her expression, they would find that she was absent-minded at this time. Her big eyes were filled with tears of grief, and her hands were trembling. However, she held back her tears and tried her best to calm herself down. Old madam's eyes stared blankly. After a long time, she recovered her breath and her tears flowed down. Really, it's a sin, a sin. I don't know what to say. She then asked Ji Xiong, Did Chitai say if your master has any other orders? Answering old madam, there are no other orders. Master only said that he won't return to the manor tonight. Old madam, please don't worry. How can I not worry? The emperor will take someone's life if he doesn't agree with him. Old madam patted her chest, and her tears fell like rolling beads. I shouldn't have asked Meng Jie to be an official. Tell me, what is this? Back then, when the plan of sowing discord came out, it indeed became famous and dealt a heavy blow to Northern Ji. However, Meng Jie was also hated by that evil embryo Meng Jixi. Now that he has become the grand tutor of the crown prince, the emperor is looking for him in all matters, both big and small. Who knows, he might even be schemed against by someone. Mammy Qin saw that old madam was crying sadly and hurriedly comforted her softly. However, Qin Yining maintained the posture of supporting old madam. Her heart was very sad. So many people from Ding General Manor had died. Even her 7- and 5-year-old little nephews were among them. However, when old Madam heard the news, she was sad because she was afraid that her family would be implicated. This was human nature. Didn't she know it long ago? Qin Yining suppressed her sadness and quickly calculated in her heart, with old Madam's temper, if she asked old Madam to let the Sun clan out now and let them send off the men from Ding General Manor, old Madam would definitely be fuming with anger and lock her up. Old Madam would rather let the corpses of Ding General Manor's people lie on the streets. Even if they smelled, she wouldn't care. Not only the old Madam, if it was anyone else, they probably wouldn't have the guts to collect the corpse after the Emperor suddenly beheaded them in a fit of rage. However, she could not bear to see her grandfather and the others die in such a miserable state. She had to collect their corpses, and she had to do it flawlessly. After the conversation with Qin Huayuan just now, Qin Yining more or less knew what to do. She wiped away her tears and came up with a countermeasure. Just as Qin Yining was thinking about this, the sound of a woman crying suddenly came from outside. "Let me go. Let me go, I want to get out, let me out." "First Madam, you can't. Auntie, don't go out. It's a mess outside. Grandmother will be worried if you go like this." "I won't. You bunch of people, if it wasn't your father or brother who was in trouble, you wouldn't care." "Lower your voice. Ayo, this is the gate of Ci Xiao Garden. My ancestors, my gods and Buddhas. I'm still afraid of being heard. That ungrateful old woman. How did she stick to me when my family was rich? Now that something has happened, she shrinks her neck. She's simply worse than a pig or a dog." The old Madam couldn't hear the conversation outside clearly, but she could hear the few words that were scolding her very clearly. "Old woman, ungrateful, worse than a pig or a dog, slap her, slap her." The old Madam's face turned purple, and she stood up abruptly. Is this the family upbringing of that stupid woman? How is it that her upbringing is completely gone after her father died? She dared to insult her mother-in-law like this. Where is the slightest bit of filial piety left? "I'm going to divorce him. I'm going to open the ancestral hall and divorce this unfilial and stupid woman for Meng Jie." Qin Yining supported the old Madam's arm at the side, but the gaze that he looked at her with gradually turned cold. Even if it was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, the old Madam's way of doing things was too unsightly. It was enough to see that the old Madam wasn't just snobbish, she was selfish to the point of being cold-blooded. Mammy Qin was on the other side of the old Madam, and she was also cursing in her heart. However, as a servant, she couldn't say much. She inadvertently met Qin Yining's gaze, and Mammy Qin felt a chill on her back. She felt that the person she was facing wasn't the fourth miss, but Qin Huayuan. She couldn't help but persuade, "Old Madam, please calm down. First Madam's maternal family was ruined, so it's normal for her to be so sad. Her mind must be muddled at this moment, and she's talking nonsense. Why should old Madam bother with a crazy person? Moreover, you have to ask for First Master's opinion before divorcing him. Moreover, you also have to take into account First Master's reputation outside." Qin Yining didn't want to continue listening to the old Madam. She had already seen through her realistic and powerful grandmother. She even thought that if her mother was divorced now, it would be a good thing. She had thousands of ways to let her mother live happily outside. Duke Ding had only fallen for a day, and the attitude of everyone in Prime Minister's Fu was already like this. How much more would her mother have to suffer if she stayed? She wasn't a person who could swallow her anger and scheme. She would be eaten until there wasn't any residue left. Even if her father wanted to intervene, he was still a filial son. Qin Yining curtsied to the old Madam and said, "Grandmother, I'll go out and take a look." Without waiting for the old Madam to speak, she quickly walked out. The old Madam was helped to sit down by Mammy Qin. She gasped for breath and stomped her feet. "Look, the sky has been turned upside down." Qin Yining walked out of Ci Xiao Garden's courtyard and saw Mother Jin and Bing Tang, one on the left and one on the right, persuading the Sun Clan, who was covering their faces and crying. In addition, there was a maidservant and an older female servant kneeling on the ground and hugging the Sun Clan's 2 legs. The maidservant was called Kui Fu, and the older female servant was surnamed Zhong. One was the 6th young Miss Personal maidservant, and the other was the sixth young Miss Wet Nurse. As for the sixth young Miss, she was standing not far away and was whispering to the other servants who were watching the show. Chin Ening had learned to be smart. He knew that he wouldn't show himself and instead found a spear. Chin Ening quickly stepped forward and casually lifted the two people hugging the Sun Clan's two legs by their collars and threw them away. Who do you think you are? You dare to touch the First Madam? Even if Duke Ding's Fu has fallen, the First Madam is still my father's first wife. What do you want to do? Do you want to die? Kui Fu and Nanny Zhong fell to the ground. It didn't hurt, but they were so scared that their faces turned pale. The sixth young Miss couldn't keep her cool and immediately rushed over. It was eldest aunt who didn't listen to persuasion and insisted on going out. That was why Kui Fu and Nanny Zhong stopped her. Eldest aunt didn't report to old madam and rushed out of the ancestral hall on her own accord. What happened? Chin Ening ignored the sixth young Miss and turned to ask Mother Jin. At this time, the Sun Clan had already cried and hugged Chin Ening. She sobbed unclearly and aggrievedly smeared her tears on Chin Ening's shoulder. She muttered, I want to go out, Sister Yi. I want to go out and see your maternal grandfather. Mother Jin whispered, fourth young Miss. Just now, the sixth young Miss came to tell Madam that Duke Ding and the others were beheaded. Madam was in a hurry to go out. We couldn't stop her no matter what. Please persuade Madam. Chin Ening hugged the Sun Clan and cast a sidelong glance at the sixth young Miss. You actually listened to Chin Huaning's words. How many bones did she give you? The sixth young Miss didn't immediately react. She blinked and angrily said, Who are you calling a dog? Calling you a dog is an insult to dogs. For the sake of second aunt, I won't touch you. However, your actions won't allow you to be on a high pedestal. Bing Tang, immediately go to see second aunt and tell her that Qin Shuangning secretly went to the ancestral hall to incite my mother. She also ordered the maidservant and wet nurse to detain my mother here and provoked my mother to shout. You have no proof. Call 2 eloquent witnesses. Yes. Bing Tang nodded. The sixth young Miss screamed, Qin Ening, you and I are both young misses of the family Qin. You can bully your adopted daughter, but can you bully your biological daughter like me? You dare to sow discord in front of second madam? Qin Ening ignored him and glanced at the old maids who were watching around. He immediately saw third shopkeeper Jing's mother, Mother Jing, pull out a sturdy woman. Fourth young Miss, this servant is willing to be a witness. Qin Ening nodded. Okay, thank you. He didn't call her Mother Jing, but pretended not to know her. Nanny Jing pulled the sturdy old woman and followed Bing Tang to the second branch in quick steps. The sixth young Miss was completely flustered. She wasn't raised under D.I. Mother's name. How could D.I. Mother let her go after making such a scene? What are you waiting for? Stop them. The sixth young Miss screamed and pulled Kui Fu and Mother Zhong to stop them. The two obeyed and chased after them. However, they were knocked down by Mother Jing and the sturdy woman. Qin Ening took advantage of the chaos and whispered a few words in the Sun Clan's ear. The Sun Clan was stunned at first. Then, her eyes rolled back and she fainted. Mother, mother, someone come. Call a doctor. Madam must have fainted from grief. Someone come. Mother Jin heard Qin Ening's words and rushed into Ci Xiao Garden to ask for help. Old Madam was wearing a cloak and had been helped out by Mammy Qin, Ji Xiong, and Yu Yi. She stood on the steps and stared at the Sun Clan with a frown. Qin Ening had already helped the Sun Clan to sit on the ground. Helpless tears streamed down his face. He called out like a kitten, Mother, don't scare me. Please wake up. Old Madam opened her mouth, but Mammy Qin secretly pinched her arm. She looked at Mammy Qin unwillingly. Mammy Qin persuaded her in a low voice, Eldest Master is still in the palace. You have to consider his thoughts. Moreover, there are so many people watching. Old Madam glanced at the surrounding servants and suppressed her anger. She swallowed back the words immediately divorce this idiot and throw her out. After all, she still cherished her reputation. Moreover, seeing her daughter-in-law, who had an accident, fainted in front of her, how could she not take her in? Carry her into Ci Xiao Garden and wait for the doctor. Old Madam ordered. Mammy Chin immediately called for people to bring a spring stool and carefully moved the Sun Clan onto it. The group of people stumbled into the house. Chin Yining took advantage of the chaos and quickly ran in the direction of the second branch. He bumped into Bing Tang, Mother Jing, and the sturdy woman who had just come out. "Fourth miss. Mother Jing, immediately think of a way to go out and help me pass a message to Master Zhong. Thank you very much. I don't dare. Miss, please instruct me." Chin Yining whispered into Mother Jing's ear and saw that Mother Jing understood. Then, he quickly rushed to Ci Xiao Garden with Bing Tang. Chapter 81. When Chin Yining and Bing Tang stepped into Ci Xiao Garden, Mammy Chin was anxiously waiting in the corridor. When she saw Chin Yining running in with Bing Tang, she hurriedly greeted them and said in a low voice, "Madam Dowager is accompanying First Madam right now. First Madam is still unconscious, so Madam Dowager is very anxious. When she saw that you weren't here, she became even more anxious." Chin Yining understood Mammy Chin's meaning and explained, "I was afraid that the doctor would be too far away and wouldn't be able to make it in time." He wiped off his sweat and anxiously urged Bing Tang, "Quickly go and take a look at my mother." Bing Tang nodded and hurriedly ran into the room. When Mammy Chin saw Chin Yining so anxious, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. At such a critical moment, it was her own daughter who was able to help. In the past 2 days, such a big thing had happened at Duke Ding's mansion, but Miss Huining didn't seem to be anxious. Moreover, she had asked carefully just now and learned that it was Miss Liu who went to the ancestral hall to report the news. Miss Liu and Miss Huining had been friends for a long time, so it was easy for her to figure out the crux of the matter. Mammy Chin sighed. "Miss, don't be anxious. Perhaps First Madam is just too sad. Everyone has to experience both good and bad things in their lives. After experiencing all 3 disasters and 8 misfortunes, their lives are complete. Don't be sad. Try to comfort First Madam." Mammy Chin is right. Chin Yining nodded and then said with a wry smile, "To tell you the truth, I'm really panicking. Although I haven't been home for a long time, other than our family members, the second closest family to me is my maternal grandfather's family. Now that such a big thing has happened to their family, I feel really bad. However, as a woman, there's nothing I can do." As they spoke, the two had already walked up the stairs together. Chin Yining continued, "Right now, all I can think of is to comfort my mother and tell her not to be sad anymore. It's fine as long as I'm filial to Madam Dowager." Mammy Chin nodded. "You're right." She knew that Chin Yining was a sensible person and would never act rashly. Previously, old Madam was still worried that Chin Yining would do something extreme for maternal grandfather's family. It seemed that she had thought too much. At this time, Bing Tang had already treated the Sun Clan. He replied to old Madam and Chin Yining, who had just entered, "The First Madam fainted because she was too sad. Why don't we let her have a good rest and try taking some calming medicine?" Old Madam saw that the Sun Clan didn't have any serious illness. Even if she fell in front of Ci Xiao Garden, there was no reason for them to blackmail her. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. With a calm face, she said, "Forget it. Let her take the medicine and rest first. We'll talk about other things later." Old Madam also didn't want to bear the reputation of being an evil mother-in-law, but the Sun Clan had offended her just now and even scolded her as an old witch. She couldn't pursue this matter now. She couldn't lock the unconscious Sun Clan back into the ancestral hall, right? Moreover, everyone knew that such a big thing had just happened to the Sun Clan's maternal family. This Sun Clan really knew how to feint. They didn't feint earlier or later, but they just had to feint at this time. Old Madam glared at the Sun Clan. Then, she went out with a cold face. From beginning to end, she didn't say a word to Chin Yining. Mammy Chin followed Old Madam out and whispered Chin Yining's explanation just now. Old Madam listened, and her expression became slightly better. At least she's sensible. In the room, Chin Yining sent away the irrelevant people and only left Bing Tang to guard the door. Seeing that there was no one around, he squatted on the steps and whispered in the Sun Clan's ear, "Mother." Sun Clan suddenly opened her eyes and looked around to see that there were no outsiders. She sat up and pulled Chin Yining's hand, saying anxiously, Sister Yi, have you arranged everything? I've already thought of a way to send the message out. Mother, don't worry. I just have to trouble you to pretend to faint first. Otherwise, I'm worried that old madam will immediately punish you. Sun Clan's tears fell down when she heard this. She didn't dare to cry out loud, afraid that it would attract old madam's people. She could only cover her mouth and sob sadly in a low voice. Your maternal grandfather's family passed away too tragically. From the way I see it, your grandmother simply wants me to sever my relationship with your maternal grandfather's family. Your maternal grandfather's body hasn't even turned cold yet, and your grandmother wants to divorce me. Why am I so unlucky to have married into such a family? The more Sun Clan spoke, the sadder she cried. Qin Yining could only hold her hand and comfort her in a low voice. Mother, regardless of what old madam is like, at least father is good. To be honest, father knows that I secretly ordered people to rent out maternal grandmother and the others. I also planned to arrange for people to bury maternal grandfather and the others. Father even secretly instructed me to do this. Is that so? Sun Clan's face was full of tears as she looked at Qin Yining with hope. Qin Yining nodded and said, it's just that father's identity is special. Even if he wanted to, it wasn't convenient for him to stand up for himself. He could only secretly instruct me. Mother, you should be able to understand father's dilemma. Sun Clan's heart felt a little better. She nodded and said, of course I can understand. That's why mother has to be strong and live well with father. Even maternal grandfather and the others in the netherworld will be gratified to see that you're living well. Moreover, if you're not living well yourself, how can you spare the energy to take care of maternal grandmother and the others? I've already arranged for people to take maternal grandmother and the others to my business. In the future, when maternal grandfather and the others are no longer around, our family still has some ability. Shouldn't we take more care of maternal grandmother and the others? Sun Clan's mother nodded when she heard this, and there was a little more determination in her eyes. Qin Yining's heart only calmed down a little when he saw Sun Clan's reaction. The more difficult the problem, the more we have to be strong. The dead are already gone, and the living have to shoulder more responsibilities. Sun Clan's mother had already been moved by Qin Yining's words, and tears once again welled up in her eyes. Qin Yining smiled and said, Mother, don't be sad. Take this opportunity to sleep first. I'll stay here with you. Sun Clan's mother was helped to lie down by Qin Yining. Looking at her charming and gentle eyes, she was inwardly moved. However, when she thought about how Qin Yining still hadn't come to see her, she felt very disappointed. While feeling sad, moved, disappointed, anxious, and angry, Sun Clan's mother unknowingly fell asleep. Qin Yining sat on the foot of the bed and lay down on the edge of the bed to take a nap. The room was quiet. The candlelight flickered, and shadows were cast on the lattice window. The person outside the back window sighed softly and leaped onto the roof. After a few leaps, he arrived outside Qin Manor. Huzi, who was hiding behind a large tree, saw his master come out. He looked around and quietly went up to greet him. Master, you're back? Everything has been arranged. It's just that our people were a little late. The corpse has already been taken away by several groups of people. Right now, we're planning to arrange for people to investigate who did it. Pang Xiao took the cloak that Huzi handed over and put it on. He said indifferently, there's no need to investigate. She did it. Huzi exclaimed in surprise, Master, are you talking about fourth young Miss Qin? Chapter 82. Huzi looked at Pang Xiao's soft eyes and laughed in his heart. He teased, Master, you are a smart person. How can the person you like be a fool? Pang Xiao glanced at Huzi indifferently. When did he say that he had taken a liking to her? Mr. Zheng, you're the one who started this nonsense. Ah, how can Master blame it on me? Seeing Pang Xiao walk away, Huzi quickly caught up with him and nagged in a low voice, it was Master who liked her. Otherwise, why did Master come here in a hurry when the Sun family was in trouble? Not only did you have to help her collect her grandfather's corpse, but you also sneaked into her house like a burglar. If this doesn't count, then what does? You have just been stripped of your position as the Grand Marshal and have been scolded by the Emperor. Now you still have the heart to care about others. You. Huzi nagged and didn't notice that the person in front of him suddenly stopped. He almost bumped into Pang Xiao's back. Master. Huzi swallowed nervously and suddenly wanted to slap himself. Really, his mouth was too cheap. He touched the pot that didn't boil. Pang Xiao didn't want to massacre the city and wrote a letter to the Emperor. He offended the Emperor and angered him. He hurriedly sent 2 eunuchs. One passed an imperial edict to strip his master of his position as the Grand Marshal, and the other passed an oral edict to scold his master. He said that he was soft-hearted, a person who fishes for fame, and is useless. Not only that, the Emperor directly arranged the Minister of War, Lian Shengjie, to lead the army and take over the position of the Grand Marshal. His master changed from a Grand Marshal to a Huban general. And the new Grand Marshal was an old, lecherous, and greedy man. His surname was Lian, but he was not honest at all. His name was Shengjie, and his character was not holy at all. As soon as he entered the military camp, he arranged a red tent, saying that he wanted to reward the army. There were 2 groups of soldiers and horses in the army. 9 out of 10 people were Wang Yi's Tiger Army, and 1 was from the original rebel army. Just these 10 people took turns to enter the red tent, which could ruin the atmosphere in the military camp. Lian Shengjie himself needed women to accompany him every night. Now the atmosphere in the military camp was rotten like porridge. His master was holding back his anger. He had just forcibly removed the red curtain with Rayleigh's means, causing Lian Shengjie to blow his beard and glare at him, saying that he would submit a report to impeach him. So, he quickly rushed to the capital to see the situation of the Qin family's 4th miss. Did he not care? Did not like her? But he really should not have mentioned the Emperor. Before the Emperor ascended the throne, he, Wang Yi, and Marquis Dingbeiji Zheyu became sworn brothers. The 3 of them were very close. Now, one came and the other was stationed in the north to resist the Taitan. The Emperor sat on the high platform, but he began to be afraid of Wang Yi. He kept his men and horses and left all the dangerous places to Wang Yi's Tiger Army. Even he, a follower, could see the Emperor's intentions. How could Wang Yi not know? The Emperor was no longer the person who overthrew the tyranny of Beiji, who was devoted to the people. Whose mind was full of thoughts. It was only a moment outside. He smiled apologetically and gently slapped his own mouth. He changed the topic and said, "But Miss Qin is really chivalrous and resourceful." Pang Xiao nodded and continued walking. Huzi breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "That day at Xianjiyu Temple, Tianjizi said she had a good marriage and that the red Luan star had moved. At that time, she looked at you and said that. If master likes her, why don't you just snatch her away? In any case, the family Qin will be finished in the future." Pang Xiao said, "It's not time yet. Was it time to snatch her away? Or was it time for the family Qin to be finished?" Huzi was confused. But seeing that Wang Yi was too lazy to talk, he did not continue to nag. The 2 of them rushed to a large mansion with 7 entrances and 7 exits. They knocked regularly on an inconspicuous corner door hidden under vines in the back garden. Someone immediately opened the door and invited them in. On the golden plaque hanging high above the main entrance of this large mansion, the 2 characters Cow Mansion reflected the moonlight and the light of the large red lanterns in the night. It was glowing faintly. Qin Huayuan returned to the mansion early the next morning. As soon as he entered, he heard about what happened last night. He did not say much and directly went to greet Old Madam. At this moment, Old Madam was talking with her daughters-in-law, granddaughters-in-law, and granddaughters in the main hall of Xixiao Garden. Second Madam explained with a smile, "Sixth girl made a mistake yesterday, so I locked her in the room to read female precepts. I heard that eldest sister-in-law fainted and is now recuperating at mother's place." Old Madam's experienced hand holding the teacup paused. The jade ring on her thumb and the teacup made a crisp sound. She didn't care about what mistake Sixth Miss made, but her anger from last night was aroused by Second Madam's words. She put the teacup on the small table with a gloomy face. Second Madam was startled. She was stunned and speechless for a while. The atmosphere in the room, which was originally slightly relaxed, suddenly became tense. Fortunately, the voice of the little girl outside broke the silence. "Old Madam, First Master is back." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Who didn't know that First Master was Old Madam's favorite? Sure enough, a smile appeared on Old Madam's face. "Quickly invite him in. He was in the palace last night and didn't sleep. He must be exhausted today. Lu Juan, prepare some food for First Master. Let him eat and have a good sleep." Mammy Qin smiled and agreed. Qin Huayuan had already taken off his cloak outside and entered the room to salute Old Madam. The womenfolk also saluted Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan looked left and right. He didn't see the Sun Clan and Qin Yining. He only saw Qin Huaining wearing a powdered brocade jacket and skirt. He didn't know what she was thinking about. Qin Huayuan looked at her clothes and frowned. "Sister Yi is taking care of the Sun Clan?" He sat down on the round-backed chair next to Old Madam and took a sip of the tea served by head maidservant Yu Yi. With this sentence, everyone understood that Qin Huayuan already knew about yesterday's matter. Old Madam was a bit embarrassed. After all, she was the one who wanted to divorce the Sun Clan. She didn't ask for Qin Huayuan's permission before saying those words. That was why the Sun Clan fainted from anger. After all, they were husband and wife, right? Old Madam didn't answer, so others didn't say anything. Qin Huayuan looked at Qin Huaining. "Sister Hui, why don't you go take care of your mother?" Qin Huaining, who was suddenly called, suddenly raised her head and met Qin Huayuan's knowing eyes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly said, "Yes, daughter wants to go." Originally, daughter wanted to go after paying respects to Old Madam. Sister Yi already took care of her all night. It should be your turn. Qin Huayuan waved his hand faintly. "You can go now. Call Sister Yi over. I have something to discuss with her." Qin Huayuan's words contained too much information and shocked everyone. First of all, although he wasn't at home, he knew everything that happened in the Fu like the back of his hand. Second of all, in Qin Huayuan's heart, Qin Yining had already risen to a position where he could discuss matters. He was clearly raising his daughter like a son. Chapter 83. Qin Huayuan looked at Qin Huaining's expression. He didn't need to guess carefully to understand what she was thinking. When Qin Huaining was the legitimate daughter, he didn't have any feelings for her. He only wanted to find a good family for her in the future. Therefore, when he found out that she wasn't his biological daughter, his feelings were different from those of the Sun Clan. He lamented that his biological daughter had wandered the streets and suffered so much. There were several times when she couldn't survive. What was more depressing was that he boasted of being smart, but he was fooled by others. He didn't know how the person who did this mocked him behind his back. Qin Huaining thought that she hid her emotions very well. Even if she could escape everyone's eyes, she couldn't escape Qin Huayuan's discerning eyes, which had been trained in the imperial court. "Sister Hui." Qin Huayuan slowly opened his mouth. Qin Huaining heard this and raised her head. Her line of sight suddenly collided with Qin Huayuan's, scaring her so much that she hurriedly lowered her head. "Father. There are a few words. I'll say it and you'll listen. How much you understand depends on yourself." "Yes. Father, please instruct me." Qin Huaining's hands hanging by her side clenched into fists. Qin Huayuan gently put down the teacup and said in a gentle voice, "You know your own origins. I've been fooled for many years. After the incident, I could have sent you back to the health hall. Don't you think so?" Qin Huaining's face was as pale as paper. The fear in her heart spread to her limbs and bones. The blood on her hands and feet almost froze. "Father is right." Her voice was dry and trembling. She wanted to defend herself, but she couldn't say a word. She didn't think so much before. She only felt that she was innocent. The old madam, the Sun Clan, her maternal grandmother, and the others were biased to no end. After Qin Yining returned, not only did he take away everything she had, but he also beat and scolded her and stepped on her underfoot. However, she didn't expect that her existence, to Qin Huayuan, was proof that he had been fooled. It was a stain in her wise and far-sighted father's life. How could she have forgotten about this? His father was such an all-powerful figure. How could he allow his life to be tainted? Why did he want to keep a stain like her by his side? Now that Qin Huayuan said this, could it be that he wanted to send her away? Old Madam was also nervous. She anxiously called out, "Brother Meng." Qin Huayuan smiled warmly at Old Madam and waved his hand to indicate that she shouldn't panic. "You are a girl that our family has raised for 14 years. In Old Madam's heart, in your mother's and my heart, even if we know that we are not related by blood, we still regard you as a member of the family Qin. We have never treated you as an outsider, but you have already treated yourself as an outsider." The room was silent. Everyone looked at Qin Huaining with different expressions. Even after Sister Yi returned home, your food and clothing were all provided in accordance with the standards of the other young ladies in our manor. You were never treated unfairly. Think about it carefully. Isn't that the case? I hope that you can focus on the right path. I can pretend that nothing happened in the past, but in the future, it's up to you. That's all I have to say. You can go take care of your mother. Qin Huaining's entire body felt like it had fallen into an ice cellar, but his face was burning red. She originally thought that her father was busy with court affairs and wasn't at home all day, so he didn't know much about the family's affairs. No matter what she did, she would at most coax Old Madam. Today, Qin Huayuan's words overturned all of her ideas. Qin Huaining didn't dare to hesitate anymore. She bowed in fear and retreated. Qin Huayuan looked at her back and shook his head. His slender hand picked up the teacup again. Second Furen, who was at the side, felt even more embarrassed. It turned out that eldest uncle knew everything. He usually didn't care about the family's affairs because he was too lazy to care. This time, Madam Sun had rushed out of the ancestral hall in a fit of anger because Sixth Miss had gone to report the news. She had even fainted in Ci Xiao Garden and was still bedridden. If Qin Huayuan blamed the second branch for this, her husband would no longer be able to hold his head up high in the imperial court. It had to be known that Second Master only had an unimportant position in the Ministry of Rights and was just eating his salary. The people outside were busy trying to curry favor with the Crown Prince and the Grand Preceptor, but they had no way to do so. They were a family, but it didn't make sense that they would offend someone because of an insensible concubine's daughter's mistake. Second Furen smiled and said, "Yesterday, the sixth young miss was impetuous and I already reprimanded her. She made her eldest aunt so angry that she fainted. It was because I didn't discipline her that there was no harm. Eldest uncle, please don't take it to heart." Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, you don't need to blame yourself. The cause of this matter was Sister Hui. You really can't be blamed." Second Furen inwardly sighed in relief. It was rare that Qin Huayuan was a person who understood everything clearly. It was good that he knew it was the eldest branch's adopted daughter who stirred up trouble. Fourth young miss has arrived. A young maidservant passed on the message from outside. Not long after, Qin Yining walked in wearing a light white plain satin robe and a dark cyan 8-piece skirt. Her long hair was tied into 2 flat buns with a dark cyan ribbon. She didn't wear any makeup or hairpins as she walked in. She was originally tall and beautiful with a charming appearance. Now that she was dressed in such a plain manner, coupled with her pale complexion and cyan eyes, she made people feel pity for her even more. Compared to the Qin Huaining who was dressed in such a delicate manner just now, this was the reaction that a member of the maternal family should have after passing away. Everyone couldn't help but think in their hearts, in the end, mutton paste is not on a dog's body. Those who aren't related by blood are still lacking by a layer. In the end, Qin Huaining is a bit too cold-hearted. Qin Yining came forward and bowed to the old madam and Qin Huayuan. She also bowed to the womenfolk in the room one by one before standing to the side in a well-behaved manner. Qin Huayuan then asked, "Is your mother feeling better?" Replying to father, "Mother's body is fine. It's just that because she was too sad, her mind is a bit unclear. Last night, she was talking nonsense in her sleep. When daughter heard it, my heart ached. It would be strange if anyone's mental state was good when such a thing happened to their family." Everyone sighed. Qin Huayuan said, "You should persuade your mother, but you also need to pay attention to your own body. I know you are filial, But there are some things that can be left to the servants to do. Look at your complexion. You are still young and are still growing. You need to pay more attention. Yes. Thank you, Father, for your concern. Qin Yining was touched and smiled. Her eyes were moist, as if they could speak. Being looked at like a small animal, Qin Huayuan couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. The commoners have already taken the initiative to bury the male member of Duke Ding's mansion. Go back and tell your mother that even if the emperor wants to pursue the matter, he can't. This matter will end like this. Qin Huayuan was telling her that her arrangement was successful and that the emperor couldn't pursue the matter because he cherished his reputation. She couldn't dig up the person from the grave again. Wouldn't that arouse the public's anger? Qin Yining let out a big sigh of relief and nodded. Yes, I will definitely tell mother. If mother knows that maternal grandfather's family's benevolence, righteousness, and wisdom didn't go to waste, she will certainly be happy. Qin Huayuan nodded and turned to the old madam, saying, there is one thing that I need mother to take care of for me. The old madam said, what is it? Don't hesitate to say it. The emperor issued an edict to bestow the eldest daughter of Duke Cao's father-in-law to me as a noble concubine. He wants her to be brought in before New Year's Eve. Now that the Sun clan is sick and the daughter of Duke Cao's father-in-law has a special status, I hope that mother can make the appropriate arrangements and not fail to live up to the emperor's grace. As soon as these words came out, the entire room was silent. The eldest daughter of Duke Cao's father-in-law, wasn't that Empress Cao's elder sister? This concubine Cao, who was about to marry into the family, was now 30 years old. Because of her devastatingly beautiful appearance, she took a long time to find a husband and didn't marry until she was 20 years old. Who knew that she would become a widow in less than 3 years and live alone until now? Many people were saying that it was time for her to remarry. Who would have thought that the emperor would actually bestow her to Qin Huayuan as a concubine? Even if everyone didn't understand the twists and turns of the imperial court, Imperial Tutor Cao was impeached and lost his position. Qin Huayuan immediately became the imperial tutor. The hatred between these two families had already been formed. What was the emperor thinking by bringing the daughter of Duke Cao's father-in-law into the Qin manor? What's more, this was the elder sister of the demon empress. It was inevitable that her appearance wouldn't be bad, but who could guarantee her character? After this concubine entered the family, if she was arrogant and domineering and had the support of Duke Cao and the demon empress behind her, how could their family live a peaceful life? Everyone was a little nervous. Old Madam thought for a moment and smiled. Good, good. Although you are the imperial tutor now, Duke Cao has been in power for so many years. He has many disciples and old subordinates. His foundation is deeper than yours. The emperor gave his daughter to you as a concubine, which is also helping you. Our family and the Cao family have become in-laws. How many misunderstandings have been resolved? In the future, with the Cao family as your in-laws, you and the emperor will be in-laws. Very good. Very good. The more old Madam said, the more refreshed she felt. She said with a smile on her face, don't worry. Leave this matter to me. It will be done grandly and won't be wronged. Qin Huayuan nodded. Second Madam and Third Madam congratulated Qin Huayuan for getting a beautiful concubine. Seeing that there was no big matter, Qin Huayuan stood up and said, this son will leave first. I will go to see the Sun clan. I will go out later. Old Madam said worriedly, you should sleep first. What matter do you have to do in a hurry? Don't harm your body. Old Madam chased after Qin Huayuan and nagged him. She sent him to the corridor before entering the door. She excitedly pulled Second Madam and Third Madam over and began to discuss how to get a concubine. At this time, all the young ladies were asked to leave. Qin Yining wore a dark blue cotton cloak and went to the courtyard. Third young miss, seventh young miss, and eighth young miss all comforted her for a while before returning. Qin Yining stood in the corridor and suddenly smiled helplessly. Had she fallen to the point where she needed people's sympathy again? It seemed that there were no real idiots in this foo. Everyone could see that Cao Shi had a very high status in Old Madam's heart even before she married into the family. In the past, Old Madam curried favor with Duke Ding's family for her son's career. In a few days, she would curried favor with the Cow family. In the past, new people would only smile and not old people would cry. With such a powerful concubine entering the family, how would her arrogant and upright mother deal with it? If a person was always suppressed by others, it would be fine. However, the Sun clan was used to being high and mighty. With such a huge difference, she was afraid that she would be even more irritated. Thinking about it, her father went to see her mother in person because he wanted to explain and comfort her face to face. Qin Yining sighed and quickly left Xixiao Garden. Early in the morning, she received news from Mother Jing that Duke Ding's family had been properly settled. She had to hurry to see the situation. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.